Warriors and Valkyries, welcome to our Hall of Norse Tales. Before we embark on our journey through the fjords of imagination, don't forget to join our tribe. Ring the notification bell, raise your axes by giving a like, and leave in the comments which realm you're watching from. Now, settle close to the hearth, for our saga is about to begin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fjord, Leif stood at the bow of his longship, feeling the gentle sway of the ocean beneath him. The salty breeze carried whispers of adventure, hinting at the magical journey that lay ahead. His weathered hands gripped the intricately carved dragon figurehead, his eyes scanning the endless expanse of water before him. "Captain," a voice called from behind. Leif turned to see his first mate, Bjorn, approaching with measured steps. "The crew is ready, and we await your command." Leif nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Thank you, Bjorn. Tell them to prepare for nightfall. We'll set sail with the morning tide." As Bjorn retreated to relay the orders, Leif returned his gaze to the sea. The sky was ablaze with vibrant oranges and pinks, the colors reflecting off the calm waters like a painting come to life. He inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp, clean air that filled his lungs. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a soft voice murmured beside him. Leif glanced down to see Astrid, the ship's healer, joining him at the bow. Her long blonde hair danced in the gentle breeze, and her eyes sparkled with the same sense of wonder that Leif felt in his heart. "Aye," he replied, his voice low and reverent. "The gods have blessed us with a fine evening." Astrid nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you think they'll continue to favor us on our journey?" Leif considered her question for a moment before answering. "The task ahead is great, Astrid. Freyr himself has entrusted us with the recovery of Skidbladnir. I believe the gods will watch over us, but we must also rely on our own strength and cunning." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the last rays of sunlight fade, giving way to the soft, purple hues of twilight. The first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, like diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth. "Tell me, Captain," Astrid said, breaking the silence. "What do you hear when you listen to the waves?" Leif closed his eyes, focusing on the gentle lapping of water against the hull of the ship. The rhythmic sound was soothing, almost hypnotic. "I hear the heartbeat of the world," he said softly. "The endless cycle of tides, the whispers of distant shores, and the promises of adventures yet to come." Astrid smiled, nodding in agreement. "And what of our current adventure? What do the waves say about our quest to recover Skidbladnir?" Leif opened his eyes, meeting Astrid's curious gaze. "They speak of challenges, of fire and ice, but they also whisper of triumph, of the glory that awaits us if we stay true to our course." As if in response to his words, a cool breeze swept across the deck, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and distant mountains. Leif inhaled deeply, feeling a sense of calm settle over him. "Captain," Bjorn's voice called out once more. "The men have prepared the evening meal. Will you join us?" Leif turned to his first mate, noticing the flicker of torchlight that now illuminated the main deck. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted towards them, a reminder of the camaraderie that bound their crew together. "Of course," Leif replied with a nod. He glanced at Astrid, gesturing for her to accompany them. "Come, let us break bread with our brothers and sisters. Tomorrow, our true journey begins." As they made their way to the center of the ship, Leif felt a surge of pride for his crew. Each face that greeted him was etched with determination and loyalty. They had volunteered for this perilous mission without hesitation, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Gudrun, the ship's cook, approached with a steaming bowl of hearty stew. "Eat well, Captain," she said, her weathered face creasing into a warm smile. "You'll need your strength for the trials that await us." Leif accepted the bowl gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma of herbs and wild game. "Your cooking alone could give us the strength to move mountains, Gudrun," he said with a chuckle. As the crew settled in for their meal, the sound of a lute filled the air. Eric, the young skald, began to weave a tale of ancient heroes and legendary quests. His voice rose and fell with the rhythm of the waves, casting a spell of wonder over the assembled Vikings. Leif listened intently, allowing the words to wash over him like the gentle tide. In the story, he heard echoes of their own mission, the theft of a divine treasure, the bravery of mortal heroes, and the ultimate triumph of courage and wit over seemingly insurmountable odds. As the last notes of Eric's song faded into the night, Leif stood, raising his drinking horn high. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying across the deck. "Tomorrow, we set sail on a quest unlike any other. We go not for gold or glory, but for the honor of the gods and the good of our people." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew as Leif continued. "The fire giants may be formidable foes, but they have never faced the likes of us. We are children of the sea, blessed by Freyr himself. With the wind at our backs and the strength of our ancestors in our hearts, we shall prevail." A cheer erupted from the assembled Vikings, their voices rising into the star-studded sky. Leif felt a swell of emotion in his chest, a mixture of pride, determination, and the tingling excitement of impending adventure. As the celebration continued around him, Leif made his way back to the bow of the ship. The night had fully settled now, the sea a vast expanse of inky blackness broken only by the shimmering reflection of starlight. He leaned against the railing, feeling the cool wood beneath his palms. The whisper of the waves seemed louder now, urgent and full of promise. Leif closed his eyes, listening intently to their song. "We're ready," he whispered to the sea and stars. "Guide us true, and we shall return Skidbladnir to its rightful place." With a deep sense of peace and purpose, Leif turned back to join his crew, ready to face whatever adventures the dawn might bring. In the heart of Muspelheim, the fire giants reveled in their mischief, their booming laughter echoing through caverns of flame. Little did they know that their stolen prize, Skidbladnir, held secrets beyond their comprehension. Surtur, the mightiest of the fire giants, sat upon his throne of smoldering obsidian, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he gazed upon the miniaturized Skidbladnir. The magical ship, no larger than a child's toy in his massive hands, glinted in the flickering firelight of the cavern. "Brothers," Surtur's voice thundered, causing stalactites to tremble overhead. "Behold our greatest triumph, the pride of Freyr, the marvel of the Aesir, now rests in our grasp." A chorus of cheers and raucous laughter filled the cavern, the fire giants stamping their feet in jubilation. The very ground shook with their mirth, sending cascades of embers spiraling through the air. Logi, Surtur's lieutenant, stepped forward, his flame-red beard crackling with excitement. "My lord," he said, bowing deeply, "how did you manage such a feat? Surely Freyr's magic would have protected the ship?" Surtur's laughter boomed once more, echoing off the cavern walls. "Ah, Logi, you underestimate the cunning of the fire giants. We struck when Freyr was distracted by the summer solstice festivities. His guard was down, and his precious ship was ripe for the taking." The assembled giants roared their approval, raising their molten goblets in a fiery toast to their leader's cleverness. "Glud." A giantess with hair like dancing flames approached the throne with a curious glint in her eyes. "Great Surtur," she said, her voice a low, mesmerizing crackle. "What shall we do with this marvelous prize? Surely it holds power beyond mere transportation." Surtur leaned forward, his massive form casting long shadows across the cavern floor. "Indeed, my dear Glud, Skidbladnir is no ordinary vessel. It is said that it can fold up to fit in one's pocket, yet when unfurled, it can carry all the gods of Asgard." A murmur of awe rippled through the crowd. Elder, a young giant with an insatiable thirst for knowledge, pushed his way to the front. "But my lord," he called out, his voice tinged with both excitement and trepidation, "how can we harness such power? We are creatures of fire and earth, not of sea and sky." Surtur's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in their fiery depths. "Are you questioning our ability, young elder? Do you doubt the strength and ingenuity of the fire giants?" Elder quickly backpedaled, his face flushing a deeper shade of orange. No, great Surtur. I merely seek to understand how we might best use this wondrous artifact. Logi stepped in, placing a calming hand on Surtur's arm. The boy speaks out of curiosity, my lord. Perhaps we could demonstrate the ship's power, to inspire our kin and strike fear into the hearts of our enemies? Surtur considered this for a moment, stroking his beard of living flame. Yes, he mused, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Yes, a demonstration would be most fitting. Gather round, my brethren. Witness the might of Skidbladnir. With surprising gentleness for one so massive, Surtur placed the miniature ship on the ground before his throne. He muttered a few words in the ancient tongue of giants, and suddenly, Skidbladnir began to grow. The assembled giants watched in awe as the ship expanded, its intricate details becoming clearer with each passing second. Delicate carvings along the hull depicted scenes from Norse mythology, while the sail, emblazoned with Freyr's sigil, unfurled majestically. Within moments, Skidbladnir had grown to its full size, dwarfing even the largest of the fire giants. Its presence seemed to bring a breath of cool sea air to the sweltering cavern, a tangible reminder of its otherworldly nature. Behold, Surtur bellowed, his voice filled with triumph. With this ship, we could sail the very skies themselves. We could rain fire and destruction upon Asgard, Midgard, and all the realms that have long scorned us. The fire giants cheered, their voices rising in a deafening cacophony of excitement and bloodlust. But amidst the celebration, Glud noticed something strange. A faint shimmer seemed to pass across the surface of Skidbladnir, almost as if the ship itself was recoiling from their touch. "My lord," she said, raising her voice to be heard above the din, "I fear the ship may not bend so easily to our will. Look how it shimmers, as if resisting our very presence." Surtur's expression darkened, his fiery brows furrowing in concentration. He reached out to touch Skidbladnir's hull, only to snatch his hand back with a roar of pain and surprise. Where his fingers had brushed the wood, angry red welts appeared on his usually impervious skin. "Treachery," he bellowed, rising to his full, terrifying height. "The ship resists us. It dares to turn its magic against the might of the fire giants." Logi stepped forward, his eyes wide with concern. "Perhaps, my lord, we have underestimated the complexity of Freyr's magic. The ship may require special handling." Elder, emboldened by the turn of events, spoke up once more. "What if we were to study it further? Surely, with time and patience, we could unravel its secrets and bend it to our will." Surtur, still nursing his wounded hand, glowered at the assembled giants. His anger was palpable, filling the air with waves of scorching heat. But beneath the rage, a cunning light gleamed in his eyes. "Very well," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "We shall study this infernal craft. Day and night we will work to unlock its powers, and when we do—" He paused, a cruel smile twisting his features. "When we do, all the realms will tremble before the might of Muspelheim." As the fire giants dispersed, each eager to begin unraveling the mysteries of Skidbladnir, Glud lingered behind. She gazed at the magnificent ship, a mixture of awe and trepidation swirling in her fiery eyes. "Oh, Skidbladnir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the ever-present flames. "What secrets do you hold, and at what cost will we learn them?" The ship remained silent, its presence a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of Muspelheim. But deep within its enchanted wood, unseen by the fire giants, a faint pulse of magic stirred. Skidbladnir may have been stolen, but its true power remained hidden, waiting for the day when it would return to its rightful master. The god friar gazed forlornly at the empty dock where Skidbladnir once rested. His heart ached for the loss of his beloved ship, a gift from the dwarves that had served him faithfully for centuries. The usually radiant god of sunshine and fertility stood in uncharacteristic gloom, his golden hair dulled and his shoulders slumped under the weight of his grief. "Skidbladnir," he whispered, his voice carrying on the gentle breeze that swept across Asgard. "Where are you, my faithful friend?" The dock creaked beneath his feet as he paced its length, remembering countless departures and joyous returns. Each step brought a new memory flooding back. Voyages to distant realms, celebrations under starlit skies, and quiet moments of reflection as Skidbladnir sailed through the cosmos. "Brother," a gentle voice called out. Freyr turned to see his twin sister Freya approaching. Her beauty was legendary, but today her face was etched with concern. "You've been here since dawn. Come, you must eat and rest." Freyr shook his head, his eyes never leaving the empty space where Skidbladnir should have been. "How can I rest, sister, when a part of me is missing?" Skidbladnir was more than a ship. It was... "I know," Freya said softly, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "It was a piece of your heart, but starving yourself won't bring it back." As if on cue, a rumble of thunder echoed across the sky. The siblings looked up to see dark clouds gathering, reflecting Freyr's turbulent emotions. "Even the heavens mourn with you," Freya observed. "But remember, brother, you are the god of sunshine. Your sorrow casts a shadow over all of Asgard." Freyr sighed heavily, running a hand through his tousled hair. "You're right, of course. But how can I bring light when I feel so diminished?" A new voice joined their conversation, deep and resonant. "By remembering who you are and what you represent." Odin, the All-Father, strode towards them, his ravens Hugin and Munin perched on his shoulders. His one eye gleamed with wisdom and compassion as he regarded Freyr. "All-Father," Freyr said, bowing his head in respect. I have failed in my duties. Skidbladnir was a treasure of Asgard, and I let it be taken." Odin placed a weathered hand on Freyr's shoulder. "No, my son, you have not failed. The fire giant's treachery is not your burden to bear alone." "But I should have protected it better," Freyr protested, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have." "Should-haves and could-haves will not change what has happened," Odin interrupted gently. "What matters now is how we respond." Freya nodded in agreement. "Odin is right, brother. We must focus on recovering Skidbladnir, not dwelling on its loss." Freyr looked between them, a spark of hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since the theft. "Recover it? But how? Muspelheim is a realm of fire and chaos. None of us can enter without risking war between the realms." Odin's eye twinkled with a hint of mischief. "Perhaps not us, no. But there are others who might succeed where gods cannot tread." "You mean mortals?" Freyr asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Indeed," Odin confirmed. "I have been watching a particular group of Vikings. Their captain, Leif, is a man of great courage and cunning. With the right guidance, he and his crew might be able to infiltrate Muspelheim and recover Skidbladnir." Freyr's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "But, All-Father, to send mortals on such a perilous quest, it would be tantamount to a death sentence." Freya interjected, her voice filled with excitement. "Not necessarily, brother. Remember the magic of Skidbladnir itself. It can shrink to the size of a toy. If we could grant these mortals the ability to shrink as well, they could sneak aboard undetected," Freyr exclaimed, his eyes widening with realization. Odin nodded approvingly. "Precisely. It is a dangerous plan, to be sure, but one that offers hope where before there was none." Freyr turned back to the empty dock, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time since Skidbladnir's theft, he felt a glimmer of hope stirring in his chest. "Very well," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "If these mortals are willing to undertake this quest, I will do everything in my power to aid them." As if responding to Freyr's renewed determination, the dark clouds overhead began to part, allowing rays of sunlight to pierce through. The dock, which had seemed so desolate before, now shimmered with promise. Freya smiled, squeezing her brother's hand. "There's the Freyr I know. the god of light and life, bringing hope even in the darkest times. Odin nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. I shall send word to Leif and his crew. Friar, prepare whatever blessings and enchantments you deem necessary for their journey. As Odin turned to leave, Freyr called out, Allfather, wait. I wish to speak with these mortals myself, to explain the importance of this quest, and to offer my personal pledge of gratitude for their bravery. Odin considered for a moment, then nodded. Very well. I will arrange for you to appear to them in a vision. But remember, the choice must be theirs. We cannot compel them to undertake this perilous journey. Freyr straightened, a new sense of purpose filling him. Of course, I understand. As Odin departed, Freyr turned once more to the empty dock. But now, instead of sorrow, his gaze held determination and hope. Hold on, Skidbladnir, he whispered. We're coming for you. And to you, brave Leif and your courageous crew, may the winds of fortune guide you on this most vital of quests. With renewed vigor, Freyr set about preparing for the task ahead. The dock, once a place of mourning, now buzzed with divine energy as the god of sunshine and fertility channeled his power into blessings and enchantments. The recovery of Skidbladnir was no longer a distant dream, but a mission about to unfold. And though challenges lay ahead, hope had returned to Asgard. Shining as brightly as Freyr's own radiant smile, Leif gathered his loyal crew, their faces illuminated by firelight as he shared their divine mission. Each Viking felt a surge of pride and determination, ready to face any challenge for the glory of their gods and people. The longhouse was filled with the scent of wood smoke and the low murmur of anticipation. Leif stood at the head of the great table, his weathered hands resting on the intricately carved surface. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. My friends, he began, his voice cutting through the hushed conversations. We have been chosen for a task unlike any other. The god Freyr himself has called upon us. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled crew. Bjorn, Leif's trusted first mate, leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows raised in surprise. The gods have spoken to you, Captain? Leif nodded solemnly. In a vision, as clear as I see you now. Freyr's magical ship, Skidbladnir, has been stolen by the fire giants of Muspelheim. We have been tasked with its recovery. For a moment, stunned silence filled the longhouse. Then, as one, the crew erupted into a cacophony of voices. The fire giants? But how can we hope to stand against such foes? Surely this is madness. Leif raised his hand and gradually the voices quieted. I understand your concerns. This quest is indeed perilous, beyond anything we have faced before. But consider the honor bestowed upon us. The gods have chosen us, mortal though we are, to right this wrong. Astrid, the ship's healer, spoke up, her voice calm, but tinged with worry. Captain, while the honor is great, how can we hope to succeed where even the gods fear to tread? Leif's eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and determination. But that is where our mortality becomes our strength. Freyr has granted us a boon, the power to shrink ourselves to the size of insects. Murmurs of astonishment rippled through the crew. Eric, the young skald, leapt to his feet, his eyes wide with wonder. Like the stories of old, we shall be as clever mice sneaking past the slumbering giants. A chuckle passed through the group, easing some of the tension. Leif nodded approvingly at Eric. Indeed, young one. We will use our wits and this magical gift to infiltrate Muspelheim, board Skidbladnir and sail it back to Asgard. Gudrun, the ship's cook and a woman of practical mind, furrowed her brow. But Captain, even if we can shrink ourselves, how are we to navigate the perils of Muspelheim? It's a realm of fire and chaos. Leif turned to her, his expression serious. You're right to be concerned, Gudrun. The journey will be fraught with danger. But remember, we are children of the North. Our ancestors have faced ice giants and terrible monsters. Are we to balk at a little heat? A chorus of agreement rose from the crew, their Viking pride stirred by Leif's words. Bjorn stood, raising his drinking horn high. I, for one, am with you, Captain. Let the fire giants tremble at our coming, for we bring the cold fury of the north. Cheers erupted throughout the longhouse. Leif felt a swell of pride in his chest as he looked at the faces of his crew, each one alight with determination and courage. But Astrid, ever the voice of caution, raised another question. What of our families, Captain? This quest could take us away for who knows how long. A hush fell over the group as they considered her words. Leif's expression softened as he addressed the concern. I won't lie to you, he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. This journey may be long and its dangers are great. I cannot promise that we will all return, but I can promise you this. Your families will be cared for in your absence, and should we fall, our names will be sung in the halls of Valhalla for eternity. He paused, looking each member of his crew in the eye. I ask much of you, I know, but I also offer you the chance to be part of something greater than ourselves, to aid the gods, to etch our names in the very fabric of the cosmos. Who among you will join me? For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, slowly at first but with growing fervor, the Vikings began to stamp their feet and bang their cups on the table. The rhythmic sound grew until it shook the very rafters of the longhouse. Bjorn's voice rose above the din. We are with you, Captain, to Muspelheim and beyond. The crew took up the cry, their voices united in a roar of determination. To Muspelheim and beyond. Leif felt his heart swell with pride and gratitude. He raised his own drinking horn, his voice joining the chorus of his loyal crew. As the cheers continued, he caught glimpses of the emotions playing across their faces. Excitement, fear, determination, and above all, an unshakable loyalty. As the night wore on, the crew began to prepare for their unprecedented journey. Maps were pored over, provisions were discussed, and strategies debated. But underlying all the practical preparations was a current of electric anticipation. They were about to embark on a quest that would test them to their very limits but also offered the chance for glory beyond their wildest dreams. In the corner, Eric strummed his lute, composing a new ballad to commemorate their impending adventure. The soft notes wove through the busy atmosphere, a reminder of the songs that would be sung of their deeds in the years to come. As dawn broke, casting its first pale light through the longhouse windows, Leif looked upon his crew once more. They were tired from a night of preparation, but their eyes shone with unwavering resolve. He knew in that moment that with these brave men and women by his side, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. My friends, he said softly, his voice carrying in the hushed morning air. Let us make ready. Skidbladnir awaits, and with it, our date with destiny. As one, the crew rose, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their determination a palpable force that would carry them through the fires of Muspelheim and beyond. With wide-eyed wonder, Leif and his crew watched as an ancient vulva wove her spells, shrinking them to the size of insects. The world around them transformed, everyday objects becoming colossal landscapes to explore. The air crackled with mystical energy as the vulva, known as Signa, stood before the assembled crew. Her silver hair flowed like moonlight, and her eyes held the wisdom of ages. The Vikings shifted nervously, a mixture of excitement and trepidation palpable among them. Sina raised her gnarled staff, adorned with runes and feathers. Brave warriors, she intoned, her voice carrying a otherworldly resonance. Are you prepared for the transformation that awaits you? Leif stepped forward, his chin held high. We are, wise one. We understand the risks and accept them willingly. Sina nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Very well. Gather close and let the magic take hold. The crew huddled together, their shoulders touching as they formed a tight circle. Sina began to chant, her words weaving through the air like silk threads. As her voice rose and fell, a shimmering mist enveloped the Vikings. Astrid, the ship's healer, gasped as she felt a tingling sensation spread through her body. "Captain," she whispered, her eyes wide. "I feel strange." Leif nodded, experiencing the same sensation. "Stay calm," he advised, though his own heart was racing. "Trust in the Volva's magic." The mist grew thicker, obscuring their vision. For a moment, all they could see was swirling silver fog. Then, gradually, the mist began to clear. As it dissipated, the Vikings found themselves in a world utterly transformed. "By Odin's beard!" Bjorn exclaimed, his voice tiny but filled with awe. "Look at the size of everything." The crew gazed around in amazement. What had once been simple blades of grass now towered above them like massive trees. A pebble nearby resembled a small mountain, its craggy surface an entire landscape to explore. Leif looked up, craning his neck to see Sina's face far above them. Her eyes, now as large as the moon from their perspective, twinkled with amusement. "How do you feel, little ones?" Her voice boomed from above, the sound waves nearly knocking them off their feet. Leif cupped his hands around his mouth, shouting as loud as he could. "We are well, Volva. Your magic is truly astonishing." Sina's laughter rumbled through the air like distant thunder. "I'm glad to hear it. Now let us test your new forms." With a wave of her staff, she conjured a leaf nearby. To the miniaturized Vikings, it appeared as large as a ship's sail. "Climb," she instructed. "Show me that you can navigate this new world." The crew looked at each other, then at the leaf. Eric, the young skald, was the first to move. "Come on then," he called out cheerfully. "It's just like scaling the rigging, only greener." His enthusiasm was infectious, and soon the entire crew was scrambling up the leaf's surface. They found that their diminutive size came with increased agility and strength relative to their new world. Gudrun, usually more comfortable in the ship's galley than on climbing expeditions, surprised herself by reaching the top of the leaf first. "Ha!" she exclaimed, pumping her fist in triumph. "Who says cooks can't climb?" Leif joined her at the summit, surveying the vast expanse of what had once been a small clearing. "Well done, all of you," he said, pride evident in his voice. "We'll need this adaptability where we're going." As the crew celebrated their first victory in their new forms, Sina's voice rang out once more. "You have done well, little warriors, but remember the challenges in Muspelheim will be far greater than a simple leaf." Leif nodded solemnly. "We understand, wise one. What other advice can you offer us?" Sina leaned down, her enormous eye filling their vision. "Listen closely, for this is important. Your size may have changed, but your essence remains the same. You carry the strength of your ancestors, the cunning of your people, and the blessing of the gods. Let these be your guide in the land of giants." The Volva then produced a small pouch, which to the miniaturized Vikings appeared as large as a longhouse. "Within this," she explained, "you will find provisions suited to your new size, as well as tools that may prove useful on your quest." Leif and his crew watched in fascination as Sina opened the pouch, revealing an array of tiny weapons, ropes, and other equipment. "And what of changing back?" Astrid inquired, her practical nature shining through even in this fantastical situation. "How will we return to our normal size when the time comes?" Sina nodded approvingly at the question. "A wise concern. I have prepared a special runestone for each of you. When the time comes to return to your natural state, simply hold the stone and speak the word Jotun. But be warned, choose the moment wisely, for you can only use this magic once." The crew murmured among themselves, the weight of their responsibility settling upon them. Leif stepped forward once more, his tiny voice filled with determination. "We thank you, Volva Sina, for this incredible gift. We will use it wisely in our quest to retrieve Skidbladnir." Sina smiled down at them, her ancient eyes twinkling. "May the Norns weave a favorable fate for you, brave ones. Now go, and may your journey be as grand as the task before you." With those parting words, Sina stepped back, leaving the miniaturized Vikings to explore their new world. The crew spent the next hours testing their newfound abilities, marveling at the changed perspective, and preparing for the journey ahead. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across what was once a simple patch of grass, Leif gathered his crew. "Rest well tonight," he advised, gesturing to the shelter they had fashioned from leaves and twigs. "Tomorrow we set out for Muspelheim. Our greatest adventure awaits." The Vikings settled in for the night, their minds whirling with the day's transformative events. As they drifted off to sleep, lulled by the now thunderous chirping of distant crickets, each of them dreamed of the challenges and wonders that lay ahead in their miniaturized quest to recover the god Freyr's magical ship. Heart pounding with excitement, Leif led his tiny crew across the vastness of Skidbladnir's deck. They marveled at the intricate craftsmanship, now visible in stunning detail, as they searched for a way to reclaim the ship. The miniaturized Vikings crouched behind a coil of rope that, from their perspective, resembled a mammoth labyrinth. The deck of Skidbladnir stretched out before them like a vast plain, its wooden planks now as wide as streets in their shrunken state. Leif peered cautiously around the rope coil, his keen eyes scanning for any sign of the fire giants. "All clear for now," he whispered to his crew. "Remember, we move silently and stick to the shadows. One misstep could alert the giants to our presence." Bjorn nodded, his usual boisterous demeanor subdued by the gravity of their situation. "Aye, Captain, but where do we begin? This ship is enormous from our vantage point." Astrid, ever observant, pointed towards the stern. "Look there," she said softly. "I see a series of carvings that might provide us cover as we move." Leif followed her gaze, noting the intricate designs etched into the ship's railings. In their current size, these carvings appeared as deep ravines and towering cliffs, perfect for concealment. "Good eye, Astrid," Leif commended. "We'll make our way along the edge, using the carvings for cover. Stay alert for any movement." With a series of hand signals, Leif directed his crew to move out. They scurried across the open expanse of the deck, their hearts racing with each step. What would have been a brief walk in their normal size now felt like an epic journey. As they reached the first of the carved designs, Eric let out a low whistle of appreciation. "By the gods," he murmured, running his hand along the intricate patterns. "I've never seen craftsmanship like this. Each line tells a story." Gudrun nodded in agreement, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's as if the very history of the Aesir is written here. Look, there's Odin on Sleipnir." Leif allowed his crew a moment to marvel at the artistry before gently urging them onward. "We can admire the craftsmanship later. For now, we must focus on our mission." As they continued their trek along the railing, the Vikings encountered numerous obstacles that would have been insignificant in their normal size. A splinter in the wood became a fallen log to clamber over. A droplet of water left by sea spray formed a glistening pool they had to skirt around carefully. Suddenly, Bjorn held up a hand, signaling the group to halt. "Listen," he hissed urgently. The crew froze, straining their ears. At first, they heard nothing but the creaking of the ship and the distant lapping of waves. Then a sound like rolling thunder reached them, growing louder with each passing second. "Giants," Leif whispered, his face grim. "Quick, into that knothole!" The Vikings scrambled into a nearby imperfection in the wood, which now resembled a spacious cave. They pressed themselves against the walls, hardly daring to breathe as the thunderous footsteps grew nearer. From their hiding spot, they watched in awe and terror as a massive foot, easily the size of a mountain from their perspective, came into view. The foot was followed by another, the giant's steps shaking the entire ship. "Curse this infernal vessel," a booming voice growled from far above. "It resists all our attempts to control it." Another voice, equally massive, replied, "Patience, brother. Surtur believes we will unlock its secrets soon. Keep searching for anything unusual." The giants' conversation continued as they moved across the deck, their words becoming indistinct as they moved away. Only when the last echoes of their footsteps faded did the Vikings dare to emerge from their hiding place. "That was too close," Astrid said, her face pale but determined. Leif nodded, his mind racing. Indeed, but it also provided us with valuable information. The giants are struggling to control Skidbladnir. We might be able to use that to our advantage. As they resumed their journey across the deck, the crew's movements became even more cautious. Every shadow might hide a giant's eye. Every gust of wind could be a giant's breath. Yet their determination never wavered. After what felt like hours of careful navigation, they finally reached the ship's helm. The great wheel towered above them like a monument, its spokes forming a complex web of potential pathways. "This is it," Leif announced, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with purpose. "If we can gain control of the helm, we might be able to steer Skidbladnir out of Muspelheim." Eric's eyes widened. "But Captain, how can we hope to move something so massive?" Leif smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We may be small, Eric, but we are still Vikings. More importantly, we have the blessing of Freyr. I believe that if we work together, Skidbladnir will respond to our touch." The crew exchanged determined glances, then began to climb the enormous wheel. As they ascended, they marveled at the intricate joinery and the smooth finish of the wood, details they never would have noticed at their normal size. Reaching the top of the wheel, Leif positioned his crew strategically around its circumference. "On my signal," he instructed, "we push with all our might. Remember, we're not just moving a ship. We're fulfilling a quest for the gods themselves." The Vikings braced themselves, muscles tensed and ready. Leif took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their mission on his shoulders. "Now!" he shouted. As one, the miniaturized crew pushed against the wheel. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, ever so slowly, they felt the wheel begin to turn. A thrill of triumph ran through the group as they realized their success. Skidbladnir, recognizing the touch of those blessed by its true master, was responding to their efforts. "It's working!" Bjorn exclaimed, his voice filled with joy and disbelief. Leif grinned, feeling the ship coming alive beneath them. "Keep pushing," he encouraged. "We're taking Skidbladnir home." As the great ship began to turn, responding to the tiny but determined efforts of Leif and his crew, they knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. But for now, they savored this small victory, their hearts filled with hope and the thrill of adventure. The deck of Skidbladnir, once a vast and daunting expanse, had become their battlefield. And on this battlefield, the minuscule Vikings were proving that size truly didn't matter when one had courage, cunning, and the favor of the gods on their side. Using their wit and ingenuity, Leif and his crew set elaborate traps throughout Skidbladnir. They watched with bated breath as the bumbling fire giants fell for each cleverly laid snare. The miniaturized Vikings huddled together in the shadow of a massive belaying pin, their voices barely above a whisper as they plotted their next move. "We've managed to take control of the helm," Leif said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "But we're not out of Muspelheim yet. We need to keep the giants distracted while we navigate our way home." Bjorn nodded, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Aye, Captain. But how do we outsmart creatures that could crush us with a single misstep?" Astrid, ever the strategist, spoke up. "We use their size against them. They're so big they'll never suspect a threat from something as small as us." A sly grin spread across Gudrun's face. "I think I have an idea," she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Remember how we used to catch rats in the longhouse? We could set up similar traps, just on a much larger scale." Leif's face lit up with excitement. "Brilliant, Gudrun. We'll turn this entire ship into one giant trap. Eric, you and Bjorn gather any loose ropes or cables you can find. Astrid, see if you can locate any oil or grease in the ship's stores. Gudrun, you're with me. We're going to plan out our trap locations." The crew dispersed, each member scurrying off to their assigned tasks. As they worked, they could hear the thunderous footsteps and booming voices of the fire giants above deck. "Hurry," Leif urged as they reconvened. "We don't have much time before the giants realize something's amiss." Over the next few hours, the Vikings worked tirelessly, setting up an intricate network of traps throughout Skidbladnir. They used their small size to their advantage, weaving in and out of tight spaces to create tripwires, greased patches, and precarious piles of debris that would seem innocuous to the massive giants. As they put the finishing touches on their last trap, a sudden bellow from above deck made them freeze. "The ship!" a giant's voice roared. "It's changing course." Leif grinned at his crew. "That's our cue. Everyone to your positions." The Vikings scattered, each taking up a vantage point near one of their traps. They watched with a mixture of anticipation and fear as enormous feet stomped across the deck, shaking the entire ship. "Check the lower decks," another giant commanded. "The ship must be malfunctioning." Leif held his breath as a colossal figure descended the stairs, ducking to fit through the doorway. The giant's eyes swept the room, passing right over the tiny Vikings without noticing them. Suddenly, the giant's foot caught on one of their carefully placed tripwires. With a roar of surprise, the massive being stumbled forward, arms flailing wildly. "Now!" Leif shouted. Bjorn and Eric tugged on a rope, releasing a cascade of barrels that had been precariously balanced above. The barrels rained down on the giant, not causing any real harm, but certainly adding to the chaos and confusion. The giant bellowed in frustration, trying to regain his footing, but as he stepped forward, he hit one of the greased patches Astrid had prepared. His feet flew out from under him, and he crashed to the deck with a thunderous impact that shook the entire ship. "What in Surtur's name is going on down there?" a voice called from above. "It's like the ship itself is fighting us," the fallen giant growled, struggling to his feet. Leif couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of the giant's words. "If only they knew," he whispered to Astrid, who grinned back at him. As more giants came to investigate, they too fell victim to the Vikings' traps. One found himself entangled in a net that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Another tripped over a rope stretched between two posts, landing face first on the deck. The chaos continued for what seemed like hours. The giants, growing increasingly frustrated and confused, stumbled from one trap to another. Their size, once their greatest advantage, had become their downfall in the confined spaces of the ship. "I don't understand," one giant wailed after falling into yet another snare. "How can a ship be so treacherous?" "It's not the ship, you fool," another retorted. "Someone must be sabotaging us." Leif signaled to his crew to fall back as the giants began to search more thoroughly. They retreated to a small nook near the helm, barely containing their laughter as they watched the continued bumbling of their enormous foes. "I never thought I'd see the day when fire giants could be defeated by a few ropes and some spilled oil." Bjorn chuckled, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. "Never underestimate the power of cleverness over brute strength," Leif replied, his chest swelling with pride at his crew's ingenuity. As the giants continued to argue and stumble about, Leif turned to his team. "You've all done wonderfully," he said, his voice filled with gratitude and admiration. "But our work isn't done yet. While they're distracted, we need to make sure we're on the right course back to Asgard." The crew nodded, their faces set with determination once more. They had outsmarted the fire giants, turning Skidbladnir into a maze of traps and pitfalls. Now, they just needed to guide the magical ship home. As they made their way back to the helm, carefully avoiding the giants' massive feet, Leif couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. They had taken on beings many times their size and, through wit and teamwork, had emerged victorious. The journey was far from over, but Leif knew that with this crew by his side, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. As they reached the helm, ready to guide Skidbladnir on the next leg of its journey, Leif smiled to himself. This would certainly be a tale worthy of the Skalds. The day a group of miniature Vikings outsmarted the fire giants and reclaimed a god's magical ship. As Skidbladnir unfurled its magical sails, Leif felt a surge of exhilaration. The ship rose into the air, leaving the bewildered fire giants far below, their angry roars fading into the distance. The miniaturized Vikings clung to the rigging of the great ship, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement as Skidbladnir began to lift off from the fiery realm of Muspelheim. The heat that had been oppressive moments before began to dissipate, replaced by a cool breeze that whispered of freedom. By Odin's eye, Bjorn exclaimed, his voice barely audible over the whoosh of wind. We're flying. Leif, gripping tightly to a rope that in their diminutive state felt as thick as a tree trunk, couldn't help but laugh. Aye, my friend. Skidbladnir is no ordinary ship. It sails the seas of the sky as easily as those of the earth. As they ascended, the landscape of Muspelheim shrank beneath them. Rivers of lava became glowing threads, and the towering fortresses of the fire giants were reduced to smoldering embers. The angry bellows of their foes grew fainter with each passing moment. Astrid, ever practical, called out over the rushing wind, "Captain, we may have escaped, but we're still the size of insects. How are we to control this massive vessel?" Leif's brow furrowed as he considered the challenge. Then, a smile spread across his face as an idea struck him. "We don't need to control every aspect of the ship," he shouted back. "Skidbladnir is imbued with Freyr's magic. We just need to guide it." With newfound determination, Leif began to climb towards the ship's wheel, his tiny form dwarfed by the massive structure. "Follow me," he called to his crew. "We'll need all hands for this." One by one, the Vikings made their way to the wheel, scaling what to them was a monumental height. As they reached their destination, they spread out along the wheel's circumference. "Now," Leif instructed, "we push together. Think of Asgard, of Freyr, of home. Skidbladnir will understand our intent." With a collective grunt of effort, the miniaturized crew threw their weight against the wheel. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then slowly but surely, the great ship began to turn. "It's working," Eric cried out jubilantly. "We're changing course." As if responding to their efforts, Skidbladnir's sails billowed with renewed energy. The ship picked up speed, cutting through the air like a knife through butter. Gudrun, peering over the edge of the deck, gasped in awe. "Look below," she called out. "We're passing through the branches of Yggdrasil itself." The crew paused in their efforts to witness the spectacular sight. The world tree stretched out beneath them, its mighty branches forming a network of glowing pathways between the realms. They caught glimpses of Midgard, Jotunheim, and other worlds as they sped past. "Stay focused," Leif reminded them, though he too was struck by the majesty of their surroundings. "We're not safe until we reach Asgard." As they journeyed on, new challenges arose. Gusts of wind that would have been mild to a normal-sized ship threatened to sweep them off the deck. Strange, ethereal creatures, curious about the flying vessel, approached to investigate. "Hold tight, everyone," Leif shouted as a particularly strong gust buffeted the ship. "And keep an eye out for any threats." Bjorn, who had taken up a position near the bow, suddenly called out in alarm, "Captain, there's something ahead. It looks like a storm?" Leif squinted into the distance, his heart sinking as he saw the roiling mass of clouds approaching. Lightning flickered within the dark formation, and he could hear the ominous rumble of thunder. "It's no ordinary storm," Astrid said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "Those must be Thor's thunderclouds." The crew exchanged worried glances. Even at their normal size, navigating such a storm would be perilous. In their current state, it seemed almost impossible. But Leif's face was set with determination. "We've come too far to turn back now," he declared. "Bjorn, Eric, man the sails. Gudrun, Astrid, help me with the wheel. We're going to thread our way through." As they approached the storm, the air crackled with electricity. Lightning bolts, as large as mountains from their perspective, lanced past the ship. The thunder was deafening, shaking Skidbladnir to its very core. "Left!" Leif shouted, and the crew strained to turn the wheel. Skidbladnir responded, narrowly avoiding a massive lightning strike. "Right!" came the next command, and again they dodged disaster. For what seemed like an eternity, they navigated through the storm, each moment fraught with danger. The Vikings worked in perfect unison, their earlier trials having forged them into an unbreakable team. Finally, after one last gut-wrenching turn, they burst through the other side of the storm. The air cleared, and in the distance, they could see the gleaming spires of Asgard. A cheer went up from the exhausted crew. They had done it. Against all odds, they had escaped Muspelheim, navigated Yggdrasil, braved Thor's storms, and were now approaching the realm of the gods. As they drew closer to Asgard, Leif felt a tingling sensation spreading through his body. He looked down to see himself and his crew beginning to grow, returning to their normal size. The magic is wearing off, he realized aloud. Freyr must be nearby. Sure enough, as Skidbladnir gently touched down on the shores of Asgard, they saw the god Freyr approaching, his face beaming with joy and gratitude. Leif turned to his crew, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it, my friends," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've returned Skidbladnir to its rightful owner." As they disembarked, ready to meet Freyr and conclude their incredible journey, each Viking knew that they had just lived through a tale that would be told for generations to come. The great escape of Skidbladnir, orchestrated by a crew no bigger than insects, would go down in legend as one of the greatest adventures in Norse history. Freyr's eyes shimmered with joy as Skidbladnir glided gracefully back to its rightful place. The god's warm smile filled Leif and his crew with a sense of accomplishment and honor. As the magical ship touched down on the glittering shores of Asgard, Leif and his crew stood on the deck, their bodies still tingling from the recent return to their normal size. The radiant light of the god realm bathed them in a golden glow, a stark contrast to the fiery depths of Muspelheim they had so recently escaped. Freyr strode towards them, his every step causing flowers to bloom in his wake. His presence was overwhelming, filling the air with an aura of vitality and abundance. As he approached, Leif and his crew dropped to one knee, bowing their heads in reverence. "Rise, brave warriors," Freyr's voice rang out, melodious and filled with warmth. "You have accomplished a feat worthy of the greatest sagas." Leif stood, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and pride. "Lord Freyr," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "we return Skidbladnir to you, as was our sacred duty." Freyr's smile broadened, his eyes twinkling with gratitude. "And you have done so with a courage and ingenuity that has impressed even the gods. Come, tell me of your journey." As if on cue, the air shimmered around them, and suddenly they found themselves in a grand feasting hall. Long tables laden with sumptuous foods and overflowing mead horns stretched as far as the eye could see. At the head of the hall sat Odin himself, his one eye gleaming with interest. "Speak, Leif Erikson," Odin's voice boomed across the hall. "Let all of Asgard hear of your great deed." Leif swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every divine gaze upon him. But as he looked at his crew, seeing their encouraging nods, he found his voice. "Great Odin, Lord Freyr, and all assembled gods," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Our journey began with your blessing, and a magic beyond our comprehension." As Leif recounted their adventure, the hall hung on his every word. He spoke of their transformation, of sneaking aboard Skidbladnir under the very noses of the fire giants. He told of their clever traps and daring escape, of braving the branches of Yggdrasil and Thor's mighty storms. When he finished, a moment of awed silence fell over the hall before it erupted into thunderous applause. The gods themselves rose to their feet, honoring the mortal heroes before them. Freyr stepped forward once more, his face beaming with pride. "Leif Erikson, you and your crew have proven yourselves worthy of legend. Your names shall be sung in the halls of Asgard for eternity." Bjorn, usually the most boisterous of the crew, found himself speechless in the face of such praise. It was Astrid who found her voice first. "Lord Freyr," she said, bowing her head respectfully, "we are honored by your words. But tell us, how did Skidbladnir come to be stolen in the first place?" A shadow of regret passed over Freyr's face. "Ah, brave Astrid, your question is just. I'm afraid my own complacency was to blame. I had grown too confident in Skidbladnir's magic, believing it beyond the reach of any who would dare to steal it. The fire giants proved me wrong, much to my shame." Odin's voice cut through the hall once more. "Let this be a lesson to all," he declared. "Even the mightiest among us can fall prey to overconfidence. It took the courage and cleverness of these mortals to right what we gods had allowed to go wrong." A murmur of agreement passed through the assembled deities. Leif felt a swell of pride, not just for himself but for all of humanity. They had proven their worth in the eyes of the gods themselves. Freyr turned back to the crew, his eyes twinkling. "Now, brave ones, you must tell me, how did you manage to control Skidbladnir at your diminutive size? Even I find it challenging at times, and I am its master." Eric, the young skald, stepped forward eagerly. "My lord, it was Captain Leif's insight that guided us. He realized that we didn't need to control every aspect of the ship. We just needed to guide its intent." Freyr's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Truly? Leif Erikson, you have understood a fundamental truth about Skidbladnir that few have grasped. The ship is not merely a vessel, but a living extension of my will. By aligning your intent with its purpose, you unlocked its full potential." Gudrun, who had remained quiet until now, spoke up. "Lord Freyr, if I may, during our journey, we saw wonders beyond imagination. The branches of Yggdrasil, realms we had only heard of in stories. How can we return to our normal lives after experiencing such marvels?" Freyr's expression softened, understanding shining in his eyes. "Ah, Gudrun, that is the blessing and the curse of the hero's journey. You have seen behind the veil of the world, and you will carry that knowledge with you always. But do not think your adventures are at an end. The world of mortals holds wonders of its own, waiting for brave explorers to discover them." Odin stood then, his presence commanding the attention of all in the hall. "Leif Erikson and his valiant crew, you have earned more than just our gratitude. You have proven yourselves true heroes, worthy of the greatest rewards Asgard can bestow. Speak your desires, and if it is within our power, it shall be granted." Leif looked at his crew, seeing the same mix of awe and determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. He turned back to the assembled gods, standing tall and proud. "Great Odin, Lord Freyr, and all the gods of Asgard," he said, his voice ringing clear and true. "We ask not for riches or immortality. Instead, we request your blessing for our future voyages. Grant us the wisdom to explore, the courage to face the unknown, and the strength to overcome any obstacle in our path." A smile spread across Odin's face, and he nodded approvingly. "Well spoken, Leif Erikson. Your request shows true wisdom. So be it. You and your crew shall have our blessing in all your future endeavors." As the gods murmured their agreement, Leif felt a warmth spreading through his body. He knew, in that moment, that their lives had been forever changed. They had returned Skidbladnir, earned the respect of the gods, and secured a future filled with promise and adventure. The feast that followed was one for the ages, a celebration of mortal heroism and divine gratitude. And as Leif and his crew shared their tale with eager listeners, they knew that this was not the end of their story, but merely the beginning of an even greater saga. As a reward for their bravery, Freyr bestowed upon Leif and his crew the gift of favorable winds. From that day forward, their sails always billowed with gentle breezes, carrying them to new adventures across the vast, mysterious sea. The golden light of Asgard began to fade as Leif and his crew prepared to return to Midgard. They stood at the edge of the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge shimmering beneath their feet. Freyr approached them, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of gratitude and mischief. "Brave warriors," the god began, his voice as warm as a summer breeze. "You have proven yourselves worthy of the greatest honor. But more than that, you have shown a spirit of adventure that rivals even that of the gods." Leif bowed his head respectfully. "You honor us, Lord Freyr. We only did what any true Viking would do." Freyr chuckled, the sound like distant thunder. "Perhaps, Leif Erikson, but not every Viking would have succeeded as you did. And so I have a final gift for you and your crew." The god raised his hands, and suddenly the air around them began to stir. It started as a gentle whisper, barely ruffling their hair, but quickly grew into a swirling vortex of wind that enveloped them all. Bjorn's eyes widened in awe. "What manner of magic is this, my lord?" Friar's smile broadened. "This, my friends, is the blessing of the wind. From this day forward, favorable winds will always fill your sails. No matter where you journey, the breath of Asgard will guide you." Astrid, ever practical, furrowed her brow. "But Lord Friar, how will this blessing work? Will we simply never face a headwind again?" The god shook his head, his expression becoming more serious. "Not quite, clever Astrid. The winds will still challenge you at times. For what is an adventure without some adversity? But when you truly need it, when your need is greatest, the winds will always be at your back." Leif felt a surge of excitement course through him. With this blessing, there would be no limit to where they could explore. "Thank you, Lord Friar," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will use this gift wisely." As the wind died down, Friar nodded solemnly. "I know you will, Leif Erikson. Now go, return to Midgard. Great adventures await you." With a final bow, Leif and his crew turned and began their journey across the Bifrost. As they walked, they could feel the god's blessing settling into their very beings, becoming a part of them. Weeks later, back in Midgard, Leif and his crew stood on the deck of their longship. The fjord stretched out before them, leading to the open sea and unknown horizons beyond. The sails hung limp in the still air, but there was no anxiety among the crew. They knew what was coming. Leif stood at the helm, his hand resting lightly on the tiller. He closed his eyes, feeling the latent power of Freyr's blessing stirring within him. "Are you ready, my friends?" he called out. A chorus of affirmations rang out across the deck. Leif opened his eyes, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Then let us see where the winds of Asgard will take us." As if responding to his words, a breeze began to pick up. It started gently, just enough to ripple the water's surface. Then it grew stronger, filling their sail with a satisfying snap. The ship began to move, cutting through the water with graceful ease. Gudrun laughed in delight. "It's true, the blessing is real." Eric, the young skald, was already composing a verse. "With Friar's wind at our backs, no shore is too distant, no adventure too grand." As they sailed out of the fjord and into the open sea, the wind continued to build. It wasn't a wild, uncontrollable gale, but a steady, powerful force that seemed to wrap around their ship like a protective embrace. Bjorn, standing at the bow, turned to Leif with a grin. "Where to, Captain? With this wind, we could sail to the very edge of the world." Leif considered for a moment, feeling the pull of the unknown. "Why stop at the edge, my friend? Let's see what lies beyond." For days they sailed, the wind never faltering. They passed familiar coastlines and ventured into uncharted waters. Each morning, Leif would stand at the helm, close his eyes, and feel for the guidance of Freyr's blessing. Without fail, the wind would adjust, always pushing them towards new discoveries. They encountered storms, of course. The sea was not a place of constant calm, even with a god's blessing. But each time the waves rose threateningly or lightning split the sky, Leif would call upon Freyr's gift. The wind would shift, guiding them safely through the tempest. One evening, as they sat around the fire on a newly discovered shore, Astrid voiced a question that had been on her mind. "Captain, do you think this blessing will last forever?" Leif looked up at the star-filled sky, considering her words. "I'm not sure, Astrid. The ways of the gods are mysterious. But I believe that as long as we honor the spirit of the gift, the spirit of exploration and adventure, the winds will favor us." Eric nodded enthusiastically. "And even if the blessing were to fade, look at all we've already accomplished. We've sailed further than any Vikings before us, seen wonders beyond imagination." "Aye," Bjorn agreed, raising his drinking horn. "And we'll keep sailing with or without divine winds. It's who we are now." Leif smiled at his crew, feeling a swell of pride. Well said, my friends. The true blessing isn't just the favorable wind. It's the spirit of adventure that Freyr awakened in us. As they continued their journey in the days and weeks that followed, Leif and his crew realized that the blessing of the wind was more than just a supernatural aid. It was a reminder of their incredible adventure, of the time they stood among the gods. It pushed them to explore further, to never settle for the known when the unknown beckoned. And so, with sails full of Asgard's breath and hearts full of Viking courage, Leif Erikson and his crew sailed on. They discovered new lands, encountered strange peoples, and faced challenges that would become the stuff of legend. Through it all, the wind at their backs reminded them of the greatness they had touched and the endless possibilities that lay ahead on the vast, mysterious sea. Warriors and Valkyries, welcome to our Hall of Norse Tales. Before we embark on our journey through the fjords of imagination, don't forget to join our tribe. Ring the notification bell, raise your axes by giving a like, and leave in the comments which realm you're watching from. Now, settle close to the hearth, for our saga is about to begin. As the crisp autumn air nipped at her cheeks, young Freya tightened her fur cloak around her shoulders and ventured deeper into the misty mountains. The Jarl's daughter had always been curious about the world beyond her village, and today, her adventurous spirit had led her farther than ever before. The forest around her was alive with the vibrant colors of fall. Rich reds, warm oranges, and golden yellows painted the landscape. Leaves crunched beneath her boots as she climbed higher, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I wonder what secrets these mountains hold, Freya whispered to herself, her breath visible in the cool air. As she rounded a bend in the rocky path, the mist thickened, obscuring her view. Freya paused, straining her eyes to see through the haze. A strange sound reached her ears, a soft rumbling noise unlike anything she had heard before. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone there?" The mist parted suddenly, revealing a sight that made Freya's heart skip a beat. There, not more than a stone's throw away, stood a creature she had only heard about in legends, a frost giant. But this was no fearsome warrior from the tales her father told. Instead, it was a young giant, not much older than herself in proportion. The giant's skin was a pale blue, like the sky on a clear winter's day, and his hair was white as freshly fallen snow. His eyes, wide with surprise, were the color of glacial ice. He stood nearly twice Freya's height, yet his posture was hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller. For a moment they stared at each other in stunned silence. Freya's hand instinctively went to the small knife at her belt, but something in the giant's expression made her pause. He looked just as scared as she felt. I won't hurt you," the giant said, his voice surprisingly gentle for his size. "My name is Jokul. What's yours?" Freya swallowed hard, gathering her courage. "I'm Freya," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you really a frost giant?" Jokul nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And you're a human? I've never met one up close before." Curiosity began to override Freya's fear. She took a tentative step forward. "I've never met a frost giant before either. The stories say you're all terrifying and cruel, but you don't seem scary at all." Jokul's smile widened, revealing teeth as white as his hair. "And the stories we hear say that humans are destructive and untrustworthy, but you don't seem like that to me." Freya laughed, the tension in her body easing. "I guess we both had the wrong idea." As they talked, the mist around them began to clear, revealing a small, hidden valley nestled between the peaks. Jokul gestured towards it. "Would you like to see where I live? It's quite beautiful, especially at this time of year." Freya hesitated for a moment, then nodded eagerly. I'd love to. As they walked side by side, an unlikely pair in the mountain wilderness, Freya felt a sense of wonder she had never experienced before. The valley was indeed beautiful, with crystal-clear streams running between fields of late-blooming wildflowers. This is amazing, Freya breathed, taking in the sight. Do you live here all alone? Jokel's face fell slightly. Most of the time. The other frost giants live further up the mountain. They don't always understand me. Freya felt a pang of sympathy. I know how that feels. Sometimes I don't fit in with the other kids in my village either. As the day wore on, Freya and Jokel shared stories of their lives, finding more common ground than either had expected. They laughed at each other's jokes, marveled at the differences in their cultures, and began to forge a bond that transcended their physical differences. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and orange, Freya realized she needed to return home. I have to go, she said reluctantly. My father will be worried. Jokel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Will you come back? I've enjoyed talking with you, Freya. Freya smiled brightly. Of course. This can be our secret place. Promise you'll be here? I promise, Jokel replied, his ice blue eyes twinkling. As Freya made her way back down the mountain, her mind was whirling with the day's events. She had set out looking for adventure and found something far more precious, an unexpected friendship that would change her life forever. Little did Freya know that this chance encounter in the Misty Mountains was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A journey that would not only bridge the gap between frost giants and Vikings, but also teach both their peoples the true meaning of friendship, acceptance, and the power of looking beyond appearances. As she reached the edge of her village, Freya turned to look back at the mountains, now silhouetted against the twilight sky. She whispered a quiet promise to the wind. I'll be back, Jokel. This is just the beginning. As the seasons changed, painting the landscape with vibrant hues of gold, rich reds, and finally the pristine white of winter, Freya and Jokel's bond grew stronger with each passing day. Their secret meetings in the hidden valley became a cherished ritual, a time when both could shed the expectations of their respective worlds and simply be themselves. One crisp winter evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Freya trudged through the snow-covered path to their meeting spot. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, but her heart was warm with anticipation. Jokel, she called out as she entered the valley. Are you here? A moment later, the young frost giant appeared from behind a large boulder, his ice-blue eyes sparkling with joy. Freya, I was worried you might not come today. The snow is quite deep. Freya laughed, shaking the snow from her fur-lined boots. A little snow won't keep me away. Besides, I brought something special today. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped package. As she unfolded it, the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air. I convinced our baker to teach me how to make honey cakes, Freya explained, offering one to Jokel. I thought you might like to try them. Jokel's eyes widened with delight as he carefully took the small cake between his large fingers. He took a bite, and a look of pure bliss crossed his face. This is amazing, he exclaimed. I've never tasted anything like it. Thank you, Freya. As they sat together, sharing the honey cakes and watching the stars appear one by one, Freya couldn't help but marvel at how comfortable she felt in Jokel's presence. You know, she said softly, sometimes I forget that you're a frost giant. When I'm with you, it just feels like I'm with my best friend. Jokel smiled, a touch of sadness in his eyes. I feel the same way. But I wonder, do you ever wish you could tell others about our friendship? Freya sighed, leaning back against a snow-covered rock. Sometimes. There are moments when I want to share all the wonderful things I've learned from you with my family and friends. But then I remember the stories they tell about frost giants, the fear in their eyes when they speak of your kind, and I just can't. Jokel nodded, understanding etched on his face. It's the same for me. The other frost giants, they speak of humans as if they're all violent and greedy. If they knew about you, about how kind and brave you are, maybe they'd change their minds. Maybe someday, Freya said, hope coloring her voice. For now, though, this is our secret, our special place where we can just be ourselves. As the night deepened, Freya and Jokul shared stories of their respective worlds. Jokul told tales of ancient frost giant lore, of ice palaces hidden deep within glaciers, and of magic that could shape the very snow and frost. Freya, in turn, shared Viking sagas, tales of brave warriors and cunning tricksters, and the everyday joys and struggles of village life. Tell me more about your father, Jokul asked, his voice filled with curiosity. What's it like being the daughter of a jarl? Freya chuckled, shaking her head. It's not as exciting as you might think. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of expectations. Sometimes I feel like I'm living two lives. The perfect jarl's daughter in the village, and the real me up here with you. Jokul reached out, gently patting Freya's shoulder with his large hand. I understand that feeling all too well. Among my people, I'm expected to be fierce and cold-hearted. But that's not who I am. With you, I can be myself. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the snowy landscape, Freya realized how late it had grown. I should head back, she said reluctantly. But I'll return in 3 days, as always. Jokul nodded, rising to his feet. I'll be here. And Freya, thank you. For the honey cakes, for your friendship, for everything. Freya smiled warmly. Thank you, Jokul. You've shown me a world I never knew existed, and I'm grateful for every moment we share. As Freya made her way back down the mountain, her heart was light, despite the heavy secret she carried. She knew that her friendship with Jokul was something precious, something that defied the boundaries set by their peoples. Entering her village, Freya straightened her back and smoothed her expression, once again becoming the jarl's dutiful daughter. But inside, she held tight to the warmth of her secret friendship, a beacon of hope in a world divided by fear and misunderstanding. Little did Freya know that this secret friendship, nurtured in the quiet moments between human and frost giant, would soon be tested. The harsh winter ahead would challenge not only their bond, but also the very foundations of the beliefs held by both their peoples. Yet in those challenges lay the seeds of change, waiting for the right moment to bloom and bridge the gap between two worlds long divided. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, an unprecedented winter descended upon Freya's village. The first snowfall came earlier than anyone could remember, blanketing the world in white. At first, the villagers welcomed it with joy, children frolicking in the fresh powder and adults admiring the pristine beauty. But as weeks passed, the relentless cold and unending snowfall began to take their toll. Freya stood at the window of her father's great hall, watching as another blizzard raged outside. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, rattling the sturdy wooden shutters. "Father," she said, turning to the jarl who sat brooding by the fire, "how much longer can we endure this?" The jarl, a man weathered by years of leadership, sighed heavily. "I don't know, my dear. Our food stores are running low and the hunting parties return with less game each day." Just then the door burst open, and Bjorn, the village's master hunter, stumbled in, shaking snow from his furs. "Jarl Eriksson," he gasped, his face etched with worry. "The situation is dire. The game has all but disappeared from the nearby forests. And the ice? It's too thick to break for fishing." The jarl rose, his face grim. "Gather the council. We must discuss our options." As the village elders filed into the hall, Freya's mind raced. She couldn't help but think of Jokul, wondering how the frost giants were faring in this brutal winter. Surely they must know some secret to surviving such harsh conditions. The council meeting was somber, filled with grim reports and dwindling hope. "Our food stores will last another month at most," reported Astrid, the village's keeper of stores. "And that's if we start rationing immediately. The children and the elderly are already falling ill," added Helga, the healer. "Without proper nourishment, I fear for their lives." As the voices around her grew more desperate, Freya felt a resolve building within her. She knew she had to do something, even if it meant revealing her secret. "Father," she said, her voice cutting through the clamor, what if we could find help beyond our village?" The Jarl looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. "What do you mean, Freya? The nearest village is days away, and in this weather..." Freya took a deep breath. "I don't mean other villages. I mean, what if we could seek help from those who know the winter better than anyone?" A hush fell over the room. It was Elder Sven who broke the silence, his voice trembling with age and fear. "Surely, child, you don't mean the frost giants? They are our enemies, monsters who would sooner see us dead than offer aid." Freya felt a flash of anger at the elder's words, thinking of gentle Jokel, but she kept her voice calm as she replied, "What if they're not the monsters we think they are? What if there's a chance they could help us?" The room erupted into chaos, voices shouting over one another. Some called the idea madness, while others, desperate for any solution, seemed willing to consider it. The Jarl raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "Freya, what you suggest is dangerous. How can you be sure the frost giants wouldn't simply destroy us in our weakened state?" Freya hesitated, knowing she was about to reveal her long-kept secret. Because I've met one. He's kind and gentle, nothing like the stories we've been told." Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. The Jarl's face paled, a mix of shock and concern etched in his features. "You've met a frost giant? When? How?" "Over the past few months," Freya admitted. "In the mountains. His name is Jokul, and he's become my friend. I believe he would help us if I asked." The silence that followed was deafening. Freya could see the struggle on her father's face, torn between his duty to protect the village and his trust in his daughter. Finally, the Jarl spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of decision. "Freya, what you've done is dangerous beyond measure, and yet, we are out of options. If there's even a chance this frost giant could help us, we must take it." He turned to address the council. "We will send a small party led by Freya to seek aid from the frost giants. It is a risk, but one we must take if we hope to survive this winter." As the council dispersed, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation, Freya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her secret was out, and though she knew there would be consequences to face, for now, she had a chance to save her people. That night, as the blizzard raged on, Freya prepared for her journey. She packed supplies, warm furs, and a small token, one of the honey cakes she and Jokel had shared, carefully preserved. As she worked, she whispered a quiet prayer to the gods, hoping that her friendship with Jokel would be enough to bridge the ancient divide between their peoples. Little did Freya know that her brave decision would set in motion events that would change not only her village, but the relationship between humans and frost giants forever. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of Jokul and the challenges that lay ahead. Tomorrow, she would embark on a journey that would test her courage, her friendship, and the very foundations of the world she thought she knew. High in the frost-covered mountains, far from the struggling Viking village, Jokul sat alone on a jagged outcropping of ice. His breath misted in the frigid air as he gazed down at the valley below, his ice-blue eyes filled with worry. Though the harsh winter that gripped the land was a comfort to most frost giants, Jokul found no joy in it. His thoughts were consumed by Freya and her people, whom he knew must be suffering in the unrelenting cold. "What am I to do?" he murmured to himself, his deep voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I have the power to help them, but at what cost?" As if in answer, a booming voice called out from behind him, "Jokul, what are you doing out here alone?" Jokul turned to see Thorstein, one of the elder frost giants, approaching. His massive form dwarfed Jokul's, and his long white beard was encrusted with icicles. "Just thinking, Elder Thorstein," Jokul replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Thorstein settled beside him, the ice groaning under his weight. "You've been distracted lately, young one. What troubles you?" Jokul hesitated, torn between his desire to confide in someone and his fear of revealing his friendship with Freya. Finally, he spoke, choosing his words carefully. "Elder, have you ever wondered if the stories we tell about humans are true? If they're really as cruel and destructive as we've been led to believe?" Thorstein's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise. "What brings on such questions, Jokul? Surely you're not thinking of venturing into their territories." No, Jokul said quickly. I've been watching the valley below. The winter is harsh, even by our standards. I can't help but wonder how the humans are faring." The elder frost giant's expression softened slightly. "Ah, I see. You have a gentle heart, Jokul. It's admirable, but also dangerous. Remember, the humans would destroy us if given the chance. Their suffering is not our concern." Jokul nodded, but inside his heart rebelled against these words. He thought of Freya's kindness, her curiosity, her willingness to see beyond the fearsome exterior of a frost giant. How could he reconcile that with the tales of human cruelty he'd been raised on? As Thorstein left, Jokul remained on the outcropping, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. He closed his eyes, remembering the warmth of Freya's smile, the sound of her laughter echoing through their secret valley. "Freya," he whispered, "what would you do in my place?" The wind seemed to carry her voice to him, a memory of one of their conversations. Sometimes, Jokul, doing the right thing means taking a risk. Opening his eyes, Jokul made a decision. He would go to their meeting place in the hidden valley. If Freya came, he would offer his help regardless of the consequences. As he made his way down the treacherous mountain path, Jokul's mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if Freya didn't come? What if she did, but rejected his offer of help? Worse still, what if accepting his help put her in danger from her own people? Reaching the valley, Jokul paced anxiously, his large feet leaving deep imprints in the snow. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jokul's heart sank. Freya hadn't come. Just as he was about to leave, a small figure appeared at the entrance of the valley, struggling through the deep snow. Jokul's heart leaped as he recognized Freya, her face red from the cold but her eyes bright with determination. "Jokul!" she called out, her voice carrying a note of desperation. "I'm so glad you're here." He rushed to her side, careful not to knock her over with his enthusiasm. "Freya, I was worried you wouldn't come. Are you all right?" Freya shook her head, her expression grave. "No, Jokul. My village. We're in trouble. The winter is too harsh. Our food is running out and people are falling ill." Jokul felt a pang in his chest. This was the moment he had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Freya, I want to help, but I don't know how my people will react. And yours? Will they accept aid from a frost giant?" Freya reached out, placing her small hand on Jokul's arm. The warmth of her touch seemed to cut through his icy skin, reaching his very core. "They know about you, Jokul. I had to tell them. They're scared, but they're willing to accept help. We have no other choice." Jokul's eyes widened in surprise. "You told them about me? About us?" Freya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips despite the gravity of the situation. "I did. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. Now will you help us?" In that moment, looking into Freya's eyes, Jokul knew his decision was made. The consequences didn't matter. His friendship with Freya, the lives of her people, the chance to bridge the gap between their kinds, it was all worth the risk. "Yes," he said, his voice filled with newfound resolve. "I'll help, whatever it takes." As Freya's face lit up with relief and gratitude, Jokul felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But he also knew that in choosing to help, he was being true to himself and to the friendship that had changed his life. Together, Jokul and Freya began to plan, their voices mixing with the wind as they discussed how a frost giant might save a village of humans. As night fell, bringing with it the glittering stars and the shimmer of Aurora Borealis, a new hope was born in that secret valley. A hope that would soon challenge the long-held beliefs of both their peoples and pave the way for an unprecedented alliance. As the first light of dawn broke over the snow-covered village, Freya stood at the edge of her home, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The decision to seek Jokul's help had not been an easy one, but as she looked at the haggard faces of her fellow villagers, she knew it was their only hope. "Freya," her father's voice called out behind her. She turned to see the Jarl approaching, his face etched with worry. "Are you certain about this? The journey to the mountains is treacherous, and the frost giant, can we truly trust him?" Freya took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Father, I know it's hard to believe, but Jokul is different. He's kind, gentle, and he cares. I've seen it with my own eyes. If there's any chance he can help us, we have to try." The Jarl nodded slowly, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Your courage gives me strength, my child. But promise me you'll be careful. If there's any sign of danger, you must return immediately." "I promise, Father," Freya replied, embracing him tightly. As she prepared to leave, a small group gathered around her. Bjorn, the master hunter, stepped forward, his usually confident demeanor subdued by concern. "I still think this is madness," he muttered. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you, Freya. Take this," he added, handing her a small, intricately carved horn. "Blow it if you're in trouble, and we'll come for you." Freya accepted the horn gratefully, tucking it into her satchel. With a final wave to her people, she set off towards the mountains, the weight of her village's fate heavy on her shoulders. The journey was arduous. The snow, which had seemed magical during her secret meetings with Jokul, now felt oppressive and dangerous. Each step was a struggle, the icy wind cutting through her furs like a knife. As she climbed higher, Freya's mind raced with doubts. What if Jokul wasn't there? What if he refused to help? What if this was all a terrible mistake? "No," she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the frigid air. "I have to believe. Jokul will help. He has to." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Freya reached the entrance to their secret valley. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and her fingers were numb despite her thick gloves. But as she caught sight of a familiar blue figure in the distance, a surge of hope gave her renewed strength. "Jokul!" she called out, her voice hoarse from the cold. "Jokul, I'm here." The young frost giant turned, his ice-blue eyes widening in surprise and concern. In an instant he was by her side, his massive form shielding her from the biting wind. "Freya, what are you doing here in this weather? You could have frozen to death." Jokul's voice was filled with worry as he gently brushed snow from her cloak. Freya looked up at her friend, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Jokul, we need your help. My village. We're dying. The winter is too harsh. Our food is almost gone, and people are falling ill. You're our only hope." Jokul's expression shifted from concern to shock, then to deep thought. "Freya, I want to help, but my people, they would never understand. And your village, would they even accept aid from a frost giant?" Freya reached out, placing her small hand on Jokul's arm. Even through her glove, she could feel the coolness of his skin. "I told them about you, Jokul, about our friendship. They're scared, but they're willing to accept help. We have no other choice." Jokul's eyes widened. "You told them?" "Freya, that must have been so difficult. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help us," Freya pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Jokul. I know it's asking a lot, but without you, my people won't survive this winter." For a moment, Jokul was silent, his gaze fixed on the snowy peaks around them. Freya held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Jokul could hear it. Finally, the frost giant spoke, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. "Yes, I'll help you, Freya. Whatever it takes. Relief washed over Freya like a warm wave, and she found herself laughing and crying at the same time. Thank you, Jokul. Thank you so much. As they began to discuss plans, Freya felt a glimmer of hope spark in her chest. It was a dangerous path they were embarking on, one that could change everything for both their peoples. But looking at Jokul's determined face, she knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. We should leave soon, Jokul said, glancing at the darkening sky. The storm will get worse after nightfall. Freya nodded, but as she took a step, her exhaustion caught up with her. She stumbled, her legs giving way beneath her. Freya, Jokul cried out, catching her before she fell. You're exhausted. Here, let me carry you. Before she could protest, Jokul had scooped her up in his arms, cradling her against his chest. Despite the cold of his skin, Freya felt safe and warm. Rest now, Jokul said softly. I'll wake you when we reach your village. As Freya drifted off to sleep, lulled by the steady rhythm of Jokul's steps, she knew that her brave decision had set in motion events that would change both their worlds forever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a testament to the power of friendship and the courage to look beyond differences. The journey back to the village would be long and fraught with danger. But in that moment, nestled in the arms of her frost giant friend, Freya felt a sense of peace. She had taken the first step towards saving her people and bridging the gap between two worlds long divided. As sleep claimed her, a small smile played on her lips, for she knew that sometimes the bravest decisions are the ones that bring us closest to those we once fear. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of pink and gold, Jokul and Freya approached the outskirts of the Viking village. The frost giant's massive form cast a long shadow across the glistening snow, while Freya, now awake and walking beside him, felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness flutter in her chest. We're almost there, Freya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you ready for this, Jokul? The young frost giant took a deep breath, his ice-blue eyes scanning the village in the distance. As ready as I'll ever be, he replied, his deep voice tinged with uncertainty. I just hope your people will give me a chance. As they drew closer, shouts of alarm rang out from the village. Figures emerged from the houses, some brandishing weapons, others simply staring in awe and fear at the approaching frost giant. Stay calm, Freya urged Jokul. Let me talk to them first. The Jarl, Freya's father, stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Freya, he called out, relief and concern mingling in his voice. Step away from the giant. Freya stood her ground, raising her hands in a placating gesture. Father, everyone, please listen. This is Jokul, my friend. He's here to help us. A murmur ran through the gathered villagers. Bjorn, the master hunter, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Help us? How can a frost giant help us? They're the ones who brought this cursed winter upon us. Jokul flinched at the accusation, but Freya spoke up before he could respond. That's not true, Bjorn. Jokul and his kind don't control the weather any more than we do, but they do know how to survive in it, and Jokul has agreed to share that knowledge with us. The Jarl studied Jokul intently. His eyes narrowed. Is this true, Frost Giant? You would help us, your supposed enemies? Jokul knelt down, bringing himself closer to eye level with the humans. Some gasped and stepped back, but the Jarl held his ground. It is true, Jokul said, his voice gentle despite its deep timbre. Freya has shown me that there is more to humans than the stories we've been told. I want to help, if you'll let me. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, the Jarl nodded slowly. Very well. Show us what you can do. Relieved, Jokul rose to his feet and surveyed the village. First, he said, we need to protect your homes from the worst of the cold. With careful movements, Jokul began to manipulate the ice and snow around him. The villagers watched in awe as he created intricate ice structures that resembled delicate lattice work. These he placed around the houses, forming a barrier against the biting wind. These will help insulate your homes, Jokul explained. The design allows some air to flow through but breaks up the strongest gusts. Next, Jokul turned his attention to the village's dwindling food supplies. With a wave of his hand, he created a series of beautiful ice containers. These will keep your food fresh for much longer, he said. The ice is special. It won't melt unless exposed to direct flame, and it will maintain a constant cool temperature. As Jokul worked, the initial fear of the villagers began to give way to curiosity and even admiration. Children peeked out from behind their parents' legs, pointing and whispering in excitement at the magical-seeming ice creations. Helga, the village healer, approached Jokul cautiously. "Frost giant," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "Many of our people are ill from the cold. Is there anything you can do to help them?" Jokul's face softened with compassion. "I can try," he said. "Show me to the sick." As Jokul followed Helga to the longhouse where the ill were being cared for, Freya felt a swell of pride in her friend. She caught her father's eye and saw a glimmer of approval there. Inside the longhouse, Jokul knelt beside a bed where a young child lay shivering despite the furs piled atop her. With gentle hands, he created a small, glowing ice crystal. "This will help regulate her body temperature," he explained to the astonished parents. "It will cool her if she develops a fever, and warm her if she gets too cold." As the day wore on, Jokul continued to use his frost giant powers in ways the villagers had never imagined possible. He created ice bridges to connect the village to vital resources that had been cut off by the deep snow. He fashioned tools of unbreakable ice to help with hunting and fishing, and all the while he answered questions, explained his methods, and showed a patience and kindness that slowly but surely began to change the villagers' perceptions. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the transformed village, the Jarl approached Jokul and Freya. "I must admit," he said, his voice gruff but sincere, "I had my doubts, but what you've done for us today, it's nothing short of miraculous. You have our deepest gratitude, Jokul." Jokul bowed his head respectfully. "I'm glad I could help. And I hope this can be the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples." Freya beamed up at her friend, her heart full of joy and hope. She knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be challenges ahead as they navigated this new relationship between frost giants and Vikings. But looking around at her village, now protected and renewed by Jokul's kindness, she felt certain that they were on the right path. As the villagers began to disperse, preparing for the first comfortable night they'd had in weeks, Freya took Jokul's large hand in her small one. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Jokul smiled down at her, his ice blue eyes warm with affection. "No, Freya. Thank you for giving me the courage to do this. Together, I think we might just change the world." And as they stood there, a frost giant and a human united in friendship, the first stars of evening twinkled overhead, bearing witness to a new chapter in the history of their two peoples. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow across the snow-covered landscape, the villagers of Freya's home stirred from their uneasy slumber. The harsh winter had taken its toll, leaving them weary and worried. But today would be different. Today, everything would change. The first to spot the approaching figures was young Eric, the baker's son, who had climbed to the watchtower for his morning shift. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw the massive form of Jokul walking beside Freya. "Gods above," he gasped, fumbling for the warning horn. The deep, resonant sound echoed through the village, rousing everyone from their homes. Within moments, the village square was filled with people, their faces a mix of fear, curiosity, and desperate hope. The Jarl pushed his way to the front, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Steady now," he commanded, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Let's not do anything rash." As Jokul and Freya drew closer, a collective gasp rippled through the gathered villagers. Many had never seen a frost giant up close before, and Jokul's towering form was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Freya stepped forward, her chin held high despite the nervous tremor in her voice. "Everyone, please, don't be afraid. This is Jokul, my friend. He's here to help us." A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd. Astrid, the village's keeper of stores, spoke up, her voice quavering. "Help us? But he's a frost giant. They're our enemies." Jokul knelt down, trying to appear less intimidating. His ice-blue eyes scanned the faces before him, seeing the fear and mistrust etched in their features. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said, his deep voice gentle. "But I assure you, I mean you no harm. I've come because Freya told me of your plight, and I want to help." The Jarl stepped forward, studying Jokul intently. "And how exactly do you propose to help us, Frost Giant?" Jokul smiled, a warm expression that seemed at odds with his icy appearance. "I have knowledge of surviving in harsh winters that I can share with you, and I have abilities that might be of use." To demonstrate, Jokul raised his hand, concentrating. Before the astonished eyes of the villagers, a delicate structure of ice began to form in the air. It was a perfect miniature of their village, each building rendered in exquisite detail. "By the gods," whispered Bjorn, the master hunter, his earlier hostility forgotten in the face of this marvel. Children, initially hiding behind their parents' legs, began to creep forward, their eyes wide with wonder. Little Ingrid, barely 5 summers old, reached out a mittened hand towards the ice sculpture. "It's beautiful," she breathed, her fear completely forgotten. Jokul's smile widened. "Would you like to see more?" he asked gently. As the villagers watched in amazement, Jokul began to use his frost giant powers to address their most pressing needs. He created intricate ice barriers around their homes, explaining how they would help insulate against the bitter cold. He fashioned tools of unbreakable ice for hunting and fishing, and showed them how to construct shelters that would withstand the harshest blizzards. Helga, the village healer, hesitantly approached Jokul. "These abilities of yours, where could they help our sick?" Jokul nodded solemnly. "I believe so. Show me to them, and I'll do what I can." As the day wore on, the initial fear and distrust of the villagers began to thaw like ice under the spring sun. Children laughed and played in the magical ice structures Jokul created, while adults marveled at the ingenuity of his solutions to their winter woes. Freya stood by her friend's side, her heart swelling with pride and joy. She caught her father's eye and saw the grudging respect there, mixed with a hint of wonder. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the Jarl called for everyone's attention. "People of the village," he began, his voice carrying across the now transformed square. "Today, we have witnessed something extraordinary. A frost giant, one we have long considered our enemy, has shown us kindness and generosity beyond measure." He turned to Jokul, who stood tall but humble. "Jokul, on behalf of our village, I thank you. You have given us hope when we thought all was lost." A cheer went up from the crowd, startling both Jokul and Freya. The sound of applause and shouts of gratitude filled the air, a stark contrast to the fearful silence of just hours before. As the celebration continued around them, Freya tugged on Jokul's hand, leading him slightly away from the crowd. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "You changed their minds just like you changed mine." Jokul knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his human friend. "We did it together, Freya. Your bravery in bringing me here and standing by my side, that's what made this possible." As they looked out over the village, now bustling with renewed energy and hope, Freya felt a profound sense of change in the air. The impossible had happened. A frost giant had become a hero to a village of Vikings. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft with wonder. Jokul's gaze swept over the horizon, towards the mountains where his own people dwelled. "Now," he said, a note of determination in his voice, "we bridge the gap between our worlds. This is just the beginning, Freya. Together we can change everything." As night fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, the village continued to celebrate their unexpected salvation. The fear that had gripped them for so long had been replaced by hope, and the presence of a frost giant in their midst no longer seemed strange, but wonderful. In that moment, as humans and frost giants stood side by side, a new chapter in their shared history began to unfold. One of understanding, cooperation, and the astonishing power of kindness to overcome even the deepest-rooted fears. As the days passed, the initial shock of Jokul's presence in the village gradually gave way to a cautious curiosity. The frost giant's tireless efforts to help the villagers survive the harsh winter had not gone unnoticed, and slowly but surely, the barriers of mistrust began to crumble. One crisp morning, as Jokul was demonstrating how to construct an ice shelter to a group of fascinated villagers, Bjorn, the master hunter, approached him. The burly man's face was a mask of conflicting emotions as he cleared his throat to speak. "Jokul," Bjorn began, his voice gruff but not unkind. I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I was certain you meant us harm. I see now that I was wrong." Jokul turned to face the hunter, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "There's no need for apologies, Bjorn. Your caution was understandable. I'm just glad I've had the chance to show you another side of frost giants." Bjorn nodded, a look of wonder crossing his face. "Indeed you have. I never thought I'd say this, but would you be willing to join me on a hunt? Your ice abilities could be invaluable in tracking game in this weather." The frost giant's eyes lit up with excitement. "I'd be honored, Bjorn. Perhaps we can learn from each other." As Jokul and Bjorn set off into the snowy forest, Freya watched from the edge of the village, her heart swelling with pride. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Astrid, the village's keeper of stores. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" Astrid mused, her eyes following the unlikely pair. "A few weeks ago, the very thought of a frost giant in our midst would have sent us into a panic. Now look at us." Freya nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It just goes to show how powerful acceptance can be. When we open our hearts and minds, we discover that our differences aren't as insurmountable as we once thought." As the days turned into weeks, more and more villagers began to seek out Jokul's company. Children would gather around him in the evenings, begging for stories of the frost giant realm. The village elders, initially the most skeptical, now sought his counsel on matters of survival and resource management. One evening, as Jokul sat by the great fire in the center of the village, little Ingrid climbed onto his lap, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Jokul," she asked, her small voice filled with wonder, "do frost giants have families like we do?" The giant's expression softened as he looked down at the child. "We do, little one. We have mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, just like you. Our families might look different, but the love we feel for each other is the same." Ingrid's mother, who had been listening nearby, stepped closer. "I never thought about it that way," she admitted. "It's strange how we can forget that those we consider different still share so much in common with us." Jokul nodded, his ice blue eyes twinkling. "That's the beauty of getting to know one another. We discover that beneath our differences, we're all seeking the same things: love, safety, belonging." As the conversation flowed, more villagers gathered around, eager to learn about frost giant culture and share their own traditions. The air was filled with laughter and animated discussion, the earlier tension all but forgotten. Freya's father, the Jarl, watched the scene from a distance, a thoughtful expression on his face. He beckoned his daughter over. "Freya," he said, his voice low, "I owe you an apology. When you first told us about your friendship with Jokul, I thought you were being naive. I see now that you saw something in him that the rest of us were too blinded by prejudice to see." Freya embraced her father, tears of joy pricking at her eyes. "Thank you, Father. That means more to me than you know." The Jarl squeezed his daughter's shoulder before addressing the gathered villagers. "My people," he called out, his voice carrying across the square. These past weeks have taught us a valuable lesson. We have seen that those we once feared as enemies can become our greatest allies. Jokul has not only helped us survive this winter, but has also opened our eyes to the possibility of a new future, one where frost giants and humans live in harmony. A cheer went up from the crowd, and Jokul bowed his head humbly, clearly moved by the Jarl's words. As the celebration continued into the night, Freya found herself standing beside Jokul, watching the villagers dance and laugh around the fire. "Did you ever imagine it could be like this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jokul shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Never in my wildest dreams. But this is only the beginning, Freya. There's still so much work to be done, so many more minds to change, both among your people and mine." Freya nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "And we'll do it together. One step at a time, one heart at a time. We'll build bridges between our worlds." As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, the village stood as a testament to the power of acceptance. What had begun as a desperate plea for help had blossomed into something far greater, a new understanding between two peoples long divided by fear and mistrust. In that moment, as humans and frost giants celebrated side by side, the future seemed bright with possibility. The harsh winter that had threatened to destroy them had instead become the catalyst for a change that would reshape their world forever. As the harsh winter slowly gave way to the first tentative signs of spring, the relationship between Jokul and the villagers continued to flourish. What had begun as a desperate alliance for survival had blossomed into something far more profound, a bridge between two worlds that had long been divided by fear and misunderstanding. One crisp morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Freya found Jokul standing at the edge of the village, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, coming to stand beside her frost giant friend. Jokul turned to her, his ice-blue eyes filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. "I was thinking about my people, Freya, about how they might react if they knew what has happened here." Freya nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "Do you think they would accept this new friendship between us?" Before Jokul could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of the Jarl, Freya's father. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Jokul, I believe it's time we took the next step. We should reach out to your people, show them what we've accomplished here." Jokul's eyes widened in surprise. "You would do that? Even knowing the risks?" The Jarl nodded solemnly. "Peace is always worth the risk. Besides, after all you've done for us, how could we not try to bridge the gap with your kind?" And so, plans were set in motion. A delegation from the village, led by the Jarl and including Freya, would accompany Jokul to the realm of the frost giants. As word spread through the village, a mixture of excitement and apprehension filled the air. On the morning of their departure, the entire village gathered to see them off. Bjorn, the master hunter, approached Jokul with a beautifully crafted spear in his hands. "I made this for you," he said, offering the weapon to the frost giant. "It's a symbol of trust and friendship. May it serve you well in your own realm." Jokul accepted the gift with reverence, his voice thick with emotion as he replied, "Thank you, Bjorn. This means more to me than you can know." As the small group set off towards the mountains, the villagers' voices raised in a song of hope and farewell. The journey was long and challenging, but finally, they reached the outskirts of the frost giant territory. Jokul turned to his human companions, his face serious. "Remember, my people have never seen humans up close before. They may react with fear or hostility at first. Stay close to me, and let me do the talking." As they entered the frost giant settlement, gasps and murmurs of shock rippled through the gathered giants. Jokul stood tall, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "My people, I have returned, and I bring with me friends, humans who have shown me kindness and acceptance. They come in peace, seeking to build a bridge between our worlds." For a moment, silence reigned. Then, an elder frost giant stepped forward, his ancient eyes studying the humans with intense curiosity. "Jokul," he said, his voice like rolling thunder, "explain yourself. How came you to befriend these humans?" And so Jokul told their story of Freya's bravery, of the village's desperate need, and of the bonds of friendship that had formed in the face of adversity. As he spoke, the frost giants listened, their expressions slowly shifting from suspicion to wonder. When Jokul finished, the Jarl stepped forward, bowing respectfully to the elder giant. "We come to you in the spirit of peace and cooperation. Our peoples have been divided for too long by fear and misunderstanding. We hope to change that, if you're willing." The elder was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving from the Jarl to Freya, and finally resting on Jokul. Then, to everyone's amazement, he smiled. "For centuries, we have believed humans to be our enemies," he said, his voice softening. "But if Jokul speaks true, and I believe he does, then perhaps it is time for a new chapter in our shared history." A murmur of agreement spread through the gathered frost giants. Freya felt her heart swell with hope as she watched giants and humans begin to mingle, curiosity overcoming their initial wariness. As the day wore on, an impromptu celebration began. Giants shared their knowledge of ice magic, creating spectacular sculptures that left the humans in awe. In return, the humans shared stories of their customs and traditions, bridging the cultural gap, one tale at a time. As night fell, Freya found herself sitting beside a young frost giantess named Skadi. "I never imagined I'd be sharing a meal with a human," Skadi admitted, her voice filled with wonder. Freya smiled, passing her a piece of the honey cake she had brought from the village. "And I never thought I'd be friends with frost giants. It just goes to show how much we can learn when we open our hearts to new possibilities." Nearby, Jokul and the Jarl were deep in conversation with the elder giant, discussing ways to formalize the newfound peace between their peoples. Trade agreements were proposed, cultural exchanges planned, and promises of mutual aid in times of need were made. As the celebration continued under the star-filled sky, Freya felt a profound sense of change in the air. This was more than just a temporary truce. It was the dawn of a new era of understanding between frost giants and humans. Looking around at the scene of joyful interaction, Freya caught Jokul's eye. They shared a smile, both knowing that their unlikely friendship had been the spark that ignited this remarkable change. The path ahead would not be easy. Centuries of mistrust and fear could not be erased overnight. But as giants and humans laughed and celebrated together under the aurora borealis, the future seemed bright with possibility. A new chapter in their shared history had begun, one of cooperation, understanding, and the unifying power of friendship. Years had passed since that fateful winter when Freya first brought Jokul to her village. The once unthinkable alliance between frost giants and Vikings had blossomed into a thriving partnership that had transformed both societies. As the sun rose on a crisp autumn morning, Freya, now a respected leader in her own right, stood at the edge of the village, watching a group of children at play. Among them was her own daughter Astrid, her golden hair glinting in the sunlight as she laughed and ran alongside a young frost giant named Bjarka. The sight never failed to fill Freya's heart with joy and pride. "It still amazes me sometimes," a deep, familiar voice rumbled beside her. Freya turned to see Jokul, his ice-blue eyes twinkling with warmth as he watched the children. "What does?" Freya asked, though she already knew the answer. Jokul gestured towards the playing children. "This, frost giant and human children playing together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When we first met, I never could have imagined such a future." Freya nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "It's a beautiful sight, isn't it? They're growing up without the fear and mistrust that divided our peoples for so long." As they watched, little Astrid approached them, dragging Bjarka along by his much larger hand. "Mama, Papa Jokul," she called out excitedly. "Can you tell us the story again? About how you became friends and saved the village?" Jokul chuckled, kneeling down to be closer to the children's level. "Again? You've heard that story 100 times, little one." Bjarke nodded eagerly, his young face serious. But it's important, Papa Jokul. It's how everything changed. Freya and Jokul exchanged a fond glance. You're right, Bjarke, Freya said softly. It is important. Come, let's sit by the fire, and we'll tell you the tale once more. As they settled around the central fire pit, other children and adults, both human and frost giant, began to gather, drawn by the promise of the familiar yet ever-inspiring story. Freya began, her voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. It was the harshest winter our village had ever known. Food was scarce and many were falling ill. It seemed all hope was lost. As Freya and Jokul took turns narrating their tale, the gathered crowd listened with rapt attention. Even those who had heard the story many times before found themselves captivated, caught up in the magic of that first unlikely friendship. When they finished, an elderly Viking named Gunnar spoke up, his voice gravelly with age. I remember those days well. I was one of those who feared and mistrusted Jokul when he first arrived. But seeing him work tirelessly to save our village, it changed something in me, in all of us. Helga, now a respected frost giant healer who split her time between both communities, nodded in agreement. It was the same for many of us frost giants. The tales of Viking cruelty had been passed down for generations. But when we saw the friendship between Jokul and Freya, it opened our eyes to new possibilities. As the conversation flowed, touching on the challenges and triumphs of the past years, Freya marveled at how far they had come. The annual Frost Fair, where both communities came together to celebrate their shared culture, was now a highly anticipated event. Trade between the two peoples had led to unprecedented prosperity for both, and perhaps most importantly, marriages between frost giants and humans, once unthinkable, were now celebrated joyously. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Freya found herself walking with her old friend Bjorn, the former master hunter who now served as an ambassador to the frost giant realm. You know, Freya, Bjorn mused, I often wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to befriend Jokul all those years ago. Our world would be so different. Freya nodded thoughtfully. It's strange to think about, isn't it? One small act of kindness, one decision to look beyond appearances and see the person beneath. It changed everything. As they walked, they passed the village school where both human and frost giant children learned side by side. Through the window, they could see an elderly frost giant teaching a group of attentive young humans the intricacies of ice magic. That's the real legacy, isn't it? Bjorn said, gesturing towards the school. Not just peace between our peoples, but a new generation that doesn't even remember a time when we were enemies. Freya smiled, her heart full. You're right. They're growing up in a world where friendship between frost giants and humans is normal, expected even. They'll face their own challenges, I'm sure, but at least they're starting from a place of understanding and acceptance. As they made their way back to the village center, where preparations for the upcoming Frost Fair were already underway, Freya felt a profound sense of gratitude. The story of her friendship with Jokul had become legend, a tale told not just in her village but in frost giant settlements and human villages far and wide. It served as a reminder that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could light the way forward. That friendship could bridge the widest gaps, and that understanding could melt even the coldest hearts. As Freya watched her daughter Astrid help Bjarke hang ice lanterns for the fair, she knew that their legacy would live on in these children and in the generations to come. A legacy of courage, of open-mindedness, and of the enduring power of friendship to change the world. Warriors and Valkyries, welcome to our Hall of Norse Tales. Before we embark on our journey through the fjords of imagination, Don't forget to join our tribe. Ring the notification bell, raise your axes by giving a like, and leave in the comments which realm you're watching from. Now settle close to the hearth, for our saga is about to begin. In the peaceful coastal village of Kattegat, where the sea met the sky in an endless embrace, lived a young girl named Astrid. With hair as golden as the summer wheat and eyes as blue as the fjord, Astrid had always felt a special connection to the ocean. One misty morning, as she walked along the pebbled shore, Astrid heard something unusual. It wasn't the typical crash of waves or cry of seagulls, but a soft melodic whisper carried on the salty breeze. "Hello?" Astrid called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Astrid, listen closely." Startled, Astrid looked around but saw no one. Realization dawned on her. The voice was coming from the sea itself. Her heart raced with excitement and a touch of fear. "I can hear you," she said to the waves, "but how is this possible?" The sea's response was gentle. "You have the gift, young one, a heart open to the wisdom of the waters. Listen, for we have much to share." From that day forward, Astrid spent every spare moment by the shore, learning the language of the waves. The villagers began to notice the change in her, how she seemed to glow with an inner light and spoke with a wisdom beyond her years. One evening, as Astrid's family sat around the hearth, her father Eric asked, "Astrid, my dear, what has come over you these past weeks? You seem different." Astrid smiled, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. "Father, would you believe me if I told you I could speak with the sea?" Her mother Ingrid laughed softly. "Oh, Astrid, what an imagination you have." But Eric saw the seriousness in his daughter's eyes. "Tell me more, child." Astrid took a deep breath and shared her secret. As she spoke of the sea's whispers and the knowledge it had imparted, her parents' expressions changed from disbelief to wonder. "The sea. It warns of a great storm coming," Astrid concluded. "One that could threaten our village if we're not prepared." Eric's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you certain, Astrid? This is no small matter." Astrid nodded solemnly. "I am, Father. The waves have never led me astray." The next day, Eric called a meeting of the village elders. Astrid stood before them, her voice clear and confident as she relayed the sea's warning. Elder Bjorn, his beard as white as sea foam, spoke first. "How can we trust the words of a child who claims to speak with the ocean?" Astrid met his gaze steadily. "I don't ask for your trust, Elder Bjorn. I only ask that you listen and prepare. The sea cares not whether you believe, but it would see us safe." Her words struck a chord with many. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. In the days that followed, the village came together to prepare. They reinforced their homes, secured their boats, and stored extra provisions. Some still doubted, but most were moved by Astrid's unwavering conviction. When the storm finally broke upon Kattegat, it was more fierce than any in living memory. Waves crashed against the shore, winds howled through the village, and rain fell in sheets. But thanks to their preparations, the people of Kattegat weathered the tempest safely. As the storm subsided and the sun broke through the clouds, the villagers emerged to find their homes standing and their loved ones safe. Astrid stood on the shore, tears of relief and joy mingling with the retreating raindrops on her cheeks. Elder Bjorn approached her, his eyes soft with newfound respect. "Thank you, Astrid. Your gift has saved us all." Astrid smiled and turned her gaze to the calming sea. "It wasn't just me, Elder. It was all of us working together. And it was the sea, sharing its wisdom with those willing to listen." From that day forward, the people of Kattegat looked to Astrid as a bridge between their world and the mysterious realm of the ocean. And Astrid, with her heart full of the sea's whispers, continued to guide her people, ensuring that the harmony between land and water would endure for generations to come. In the northernmost reaches of the Viking lands, where summer days stretched endlessly, and winter nights seemed eternal, lay the village of Kattegat. Among its weathered wooden houses and smoke-filled mead halls lived old Ivar, a man as gnarled and ancient as the twisted pines that clung to the fjord's rocky shores. As the season of the midnight sun approached, Ivar found himself visited by vivid dreams, more real than any he had experienced in his long life. Each night, as the golden sun dipped towards the horizon only to rise again, Ivar's sleep was filled with visions of the gods. One morning, as the village stirred to life under the never-setting sun, Ivar's granddaughter, Sigrid, found him sitting on a wooden bench outside his home, his rheumy eyes fixed on the distant sea. "Grandfather," Sigrid said softly, settling beside him, "you look troubled. Are you well?" Ivar turned to her, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Ah, little one. I am well, but my mind is heavy with the weight of dreams." Sigrid leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of dreams, grandfather?" Ivar's voice lowered to a whisper as if sharing a precious secret. "Dreams of the gods, child, of Odin All-Father and Thor Thunderer. They speak to me of things to come." Sigrid's eyes widened. "What do they say?" "They speak of bounty," Ivar replied, his gaze drifting back to the sea. "Of fish teeming in waters we have not yet explored, but also of the need for unity and strength in our people." Word of Ivar's dreams spread through Kattegat like wildfire. Some dismissed them as the ramblings of an old man addled by the endless daylight. Others, remembering Ivar's past wisdom, listened with reverence. At the next gathering in the great hall, Bjorn, the village chief, called for silence. "Ivar the Elder has been granted visions by the gods themselves," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Let us hear his words." All eyes turned to Ivar as he stood, leaning heavily on his gnarled staff. "The gods have shown me a place," he began, his voice surprisingly strong. "A hidden bay, 3 days' sail to the north, where the fish run so thick you could walk across their backs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Njal, a respected fisherman, stood up. "With all due respect, Ivar, we've fished these waters for generations. How could we have missed such a place?" Ivar smiled patiently. "The gods reveal what they will, when they will, Njal. They speak of it now because now is when we need it most." Astrid, the village's young healer, spoke next. "You mentioned unity and strength, Ivar. What did you mean?" "The gods showed me storm clouds on the horizon," Ivar replied, his expression grave. "Not just of weather, but of challenges to come. We must stand together, trust in each other, if we are to thrive." The hall fell silent as his words sank in. Finally Bjorn stood again. "Who among us will sail with Ivar to find this blessed fishing ground?" Hands raised throughout the hall, faces set with determination. Among them was Sigrid, her young face shining with pride for her grandfather. 3 days later, a small fleet of fishing boats set out under the never-setting sun, with Ivar at the lead. True to his vision, they discovered a hidden bay teeming with fish like none had ever seen. The boats returned to Kattegat laden with a catch that would see them through the hardest of winters. But the true blessing was not just in the bounty of fish. As the village worked together to preserve their catch, a new sense of unity blossomed. Old grudges were set aside, new friendships forged in the shared labor. As the season of midnight sun began to wane, Ivar sat once again outside his home, Sigrid by his side. "You've brought great fortune to our people, grandfather," she said, squeezing his gnarled hand. Ivar shook his head, smiling. "No, child. The gods brought the fortune. I was merely the vessel for their message. The true blessing is in how our people have come together." Sigrid nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And that unity will see us through whatever storms are coming." "Aye," Ivar agreed, his eyes twinkling. "That it will, little one. That it will." As the first stars of the season twinkled to life in the darkening sky, Kattegat settled into a peace it had not known in many years. And old Ivar, blessed by the gods with visions that had transformed his village, closed his eyes and dreamed once more of the greatness that lay ahead for his people. In the heart of Kattegat, where the scent of salt and pine mingled in the crisp air, lived Torsten, a gentle giant of a man with hands as large as shield bosses and a heart to match. Despite his imposing stature, Torsten was known throughout the village for his tender nature, especially with children. One misty morning, as Torsten tended to his small plot of land on the outskirts of the village, his spade struck something hard beneath the soil. Curious, he knelt down and began to dig with his massive hands, eventually unearthing a smooth, oval stone covered in ancient runes. "By Odin's eye," Torsten whispered, carefully lifting the runestone. "What secrets do you hold?" As he cradled the stone, a soft, almost imperceptible hum emanated from it, sending a shiver down his spine. Unsure of what to do, Torsten decided to seek counsel from the village elder Astrid. Astrid's eyes widened as Torsten placed the runestone before her. "Where did you find this, Torsten?" "In my field, just this morning," he replied. It seems to be singing, Astrid. Can you hear it?" The old woman leaned closer, her ear nearly touching the stone. After a moment, she nodded slowly. I hear it. A faint melody, like a mother's lullaby." As night fell, Torsten couldn't bring himself to part with the runestone. He placed it on a shelf in his small home and settled into bed. As he drifted off to sleep, the stone's soft humming grew slightly louder, weaving a soothing melody through the air. The next morning, Torsten was awakened by a knock at his door. He opened it to find his neighbor, Ingrid, looking both excited and bewildered. "Torsten," she exclaimed, "you won't believe it. For the first time in months, my little Eric slept through the night without a single nightmare." Torsten's brow furrowed. "That's wonderful, Ingrid, but why are you telling me?" Ingrid laughed. "Because, dear Torsten, I heard the most beautiful lullaby coming from your home last night. It was so soothing, it put my entire family to sleep." As word spread through Kattegat, more and more villagers reported the same phenomenon. Children who once fought sleep now went to bed eagerly, and even the most troubled adults found peaceful rest. Curious about the stone's power, Torsten decided to bring it to the village's great hall one evening. As families gathered for the communal meal, he placed the runestone on a central table. Bjorn, the village chieftain, approached Torsten with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Torsten, my friend, what is this stone that has our village so enchanted?" Torsten shrugged his massive shoulders. "I'm not entirely sure, Bjorn, but it seems to bring peace to all who hear its song." As if on cue, the runestone's melody grew stronger, filling the hall with its gentle tune. Children stopped their play, turning to listen with wonder-filled eyes. Adults paused in their conversations, tension visibly leaving their bodies. Little Freya, no more than 5 winters old, tugged at Torsten's tunic. "Mr. Torsten," she said, her voice filled with awe, "the stone is singing about our village, about how brave and strong we are and how we take care of each other." Torsten knelt down beside her, smiling softly. "Is that what you hear, little one?" Freya nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and it says that as long as we remember to love each other, we'll always be safe and happy." The gentle giant looked around the hall, seeing the impact of the stone's lullaby on his fellow villagers. Families drew closer together. Old rivals clasped hands in friendship, and a sense of unity settled over Kattegat like a warm blanket. From that night forward, the runestone became a cherished part of village life. Each evening, Torsten would bring it to the great hall, where its lullaby would soothe the community into peaceful slumber. Children grew up stronger and more confident. Adults found respite from their daily toils, and the bonds between villagers grew ever tighter. Years later, as Torsten's hair turned gray and his steps grew slower, he often reflected on the blessing the runestone had brought to Kattegat. One evening, as he sat by the fire with his granddaughter on his knee, she asked, "Grandfather, why does the stone sing only for our village?" Torsten smiled, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. Ah, little one, that's the true magic of it. The stone doesn't create the lullaby, it merely helps us hear the song that's always been in our hearts. The melody of compassion, unity, and love that makes Kattegat special. As the runestone's lullaby filled the air once more, Torsten closed his eyes, grateful for the harmony it had brought to his beloved home. In Kattegat, where the gentle giant had unearthed a singing stone, the nights were always peaceful, and the days were filled with the warmth of a community bound together by an ancient melody and the timeless power of love. In the coastal village of Kattegat, where the sky met the sea in a breathtaking embrace, lived a young shield maiden named Freya. With fiery red hair and eyes as green as the aurora that often painted the night sky, Freya had always felt a special connection to the celestial lights that danced above their Norse homeland. One crisp autumn evening, as the village gathered in the great hall to discuss the coming winter, an argument broke out between two prominent families over fishing rights. The heated words echoed through the wooden structure, threatening to tear apart the fabric of their close-knit community. Amidst the chaos, Freya slipped outside, seeking solace in the night air. As she gazed upward, the sky erupted in a spectacular display of green and purple lights, swirling and pulsating with an otherworldly energy. "Great Odin?" Freya whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "What are you trying to tell us?" As if in response, the lights shifted, forming patterns that seemed to speak directly to Freya's heart. She watched, transfixed, as images of unity, cooperation, and shared prosperity danced across the heavens. Suddenly, a gruff voice broke her reverie. "What are you doing out here, girl? The meeting's not over." Freya turned to see Eric, one of the village elders, standing behind her. His face was etched with the lines of the ongoing dispute. "Elder Eric," Freya said, her voice filled with excitement. "The gods are speaking to us through the lights. They're showing us a way to resolve the conflict." Eric's eyebrows rose skeptically. "And what do these lights tell you, young Freya?" Freya pointed to the sky, where the aurora was weaving intricate patterns. "See how the green and purple intertwine? They're separate but working together to create something beautiful, just as our families must do." Eric squinted at the sky, his expression softening slightly. "Go on," he urged. Encouraged, Freya continued, "The lights show abundance when they're in harmony. I believe if we work together, sharing the fishing grounds fairly, there will be enough for all." Eric stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You have a keen eye, Freya. Perhaps there's wisdom in those lights after all." Together they returned to the great hall. The argument was still raging, voices raised in anger and frustration. "Silence!" Eric's voice boomed across the room. All eyes turned to him and Freya. "This young shield maiden has seen a sign from the gods themselves. We would do well to listen." Freya stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Friends, families of Kattegat, the northern lights dance for us tonight with a message of unity." She described what she had seen, painting a vivid picture of cooperation and shared prosperity. As she spoke, a hush fell over the crowd. Astrid, the matriarch of one of the feuding families, was the first to speak. "And how do we know this is truly a sign from the gods and not just the fanciful imagination of a young girl?" Freya met Astrid's gaze steadily. "I invite you all to come outside and see for yourselves. The lights still dance in the sky." The villagers filed out of the hall, gasping in awe as they beheld the spectacular aurora. Freya pointed out the patterns she had seen, and to her amazement, others began to see them too. Bjorn, the leader of the other family in the dispute, turned to Astrid. "Perhaps we have been foolish, fighting over what the gods have provided for all of us." Astrid nodded slowly. "Aye, perhaps we have. What if we were to divide the fishing grounds not by family but by seasons? Each family could have primary rights at different times of the year." As the two former rivals began to discuss the idea, a sense of relief washed over the gathered villagers. The northern lights above seemed to pulse with approval, their dance growing even more vibrant. In the days that followed, Freya's interpretation of the aurora became a turning point for Kattegat. The fishing dispute was resolved amicably, with a new system that benefited all. But more than that, the village gained a new appreciation for the wisdom that could be found in the natural world around them. Freya's gift for reading the lights became well known, and villagers often sought her counsel on nights when the aurora graced the sky. She helped resolve disputes, guided important decisions, and brought a sense of divine connection to the community. One evening, as Freya stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea, Eric approached her again. "You've brought great change to our village, Freya," he said, his voice warm with pride. Freya smiled, her eyes reflecting the dancing lights above. "It wasn't me, Elder Eric. It was always there in our hearts. The lights just helped us see it." Eric nodded sagely. "And that, young one, is the greatest wisdom of all, to see the truth that lies within us all." As they stood together, watching the northern lights paint the sky with messages of hope and unity, Freya felt a deep sense of peace. In Kattegat, where the celestial dance of the aurora borealis had once been merely a beautiful sight, it now served as a brilliant reminder of the harmony that could be achieved when people opened their hearts to the wisdom of the world around them. The village of Kattegat had seen its share of visitors, but none quite like the skald who arrived on a misty autumn morning. He appeared as if from nowhere, a tall figure wrapped in a travel-worn cloak, a harp slung across his back. The villagers watched with curiosity as he made his way to the great hall, his footsteps leaving no trace in the damp earth. Bjorn, the village chieftain, met the stranger at the hall's entrance. "Welcome, traveler. What brings you to our shores?" The skald pushed back his hood, revealing a face that seemed both young and ancient at once. His eyes sparkled with an otherworldly light as he spoke. "I am Alric, a wanderer of worlds and weaver of tales. I've come to share stories that have long been forgotten." Bjorn's brow furrowed. "Forgotten tales? Of what do you speak?" Alric smiled mysteriously. "Of your own history, good chieftain. The legends of your ancestors that time has obscured." Word of the skald's arrival spread quickly through Kattegat. That evening, the great hall was packed with villagers eager to hear what Alric had to say. As the fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, the skald took his place at the center of the room. His fingers brushed the strings of his harp, producing a melody that seemed to echo from the depths of time itself. As he began to speak, his voice resonated with power and ancient wisdom. "Listen, people of Kattegat, to the tale of your foremother, Astrid the Valiant," Alric began. "In an age when the world was younger and the gods walked among us, Astrid led your people across stormy seas to this very shore." As Alric's tale unfolded, the villagers found themselves transported. They could almost see Astrid standing at the prow of her longship, her golden hair whipping in the wind as she guided her people to their new home. Ingrid, the village's eldest member, gasped softly. "My grandmother used to whisper of Astrid, but I thought it merely a child's fancy." Alric's eyes met hers. "The stories live in your blood, good Ingrid. They were never truly forgotten, only sleeping." Throughout the night, Alric shared tale after tale of great battles and tender loves, of trials overcome and lessons learned. With each story, the villagers felt a stirring in their hearts, a connection to their past growing stronger. Young Eric, his eyes wide with wonder, asked, "But how do you know these stories, Alric? You're not from our village." Alric's smile was gentle. "The tales of your people are written in the wind and waves, young one. For those who know how to listen, they're as clear as the stars in the sky." As dawn approached, Alric's voice grew soft. "Remember, people of Kattegat, the strength that flows in your veins. You are the children of Astrid the Valiant, of Bjorn Ironside, of countless heroes whose names may have been lost, but whose spirit lives on in you." A hush fell over the hall as his words sank in. Then, slowly, conversations began to buzz. Villagers turned to one another, sharing fragments of memories passed down through generations, piecing together their shared history. Bjorn approached Alric, his eyes misty with emotion. You've given us a great gift, wanderer. How can we repay you? Alric shook his head. The gift was always yours. Chieftain, I merely helped you unwrap it. My payment is seeing the light of recognition in your eyes, the pride in your bearing as you reclaim your heritage. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Alric prepared to take his leave. The villagers gathered to bid him farewell, each feeling forever changed by the night's revelations. Little Freya tugged at Alric's cloak. Will you come back and tell us more stories? Alric knelt down, meeting her gaze. The stories live within you now, little one. Share them, pass them on, and I'll always be here in spirit. With a final strum of his harp, Alric turned and walked away, seeming to fade into the morning mist. But his presence lingered in Kattegat, in the newfound strength and unity of its people. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with energy. Elders shared long-forgotten tales with eager youth. Family histories were recounted with pride, and a sense of shared purpose filled the air. Bjorn, watching his people with satisfaction, murmured to himself, "We've been given a second chance to know ourselves. This time, we won't forget." And so, in the coastal village of Kattegat, where a wandering skald had awakened sleeping memories, the people faced the future with renewed vigor, their hearts beating in time with the ancient rhythms of their forebears' tales. The winter that descended upon Kattegat was unlike any in living memory. Snow piled high against longhouses, and the fjord froze solid, trapping fishing boats in its icy grip. As the villagers huddled around meager fires, young Leif, known for his kind heart and curious nature, ventured out into the frigid wilderness. Leif trudged through the deep snow, his fur-lined boots crunching with each step. The wind howled around him, carrying whispers of an ancient sorrow. As he crested a hill, he gasped at the sight before him. A massive figure, easily thrice the height of the tallest Viking, sat hunched on a frozen boulder, great icy tears streaming down its blue-tinged face. "By the gods," Leif whispered, his breath visible in the freezing air. "A frost giant." The creature's head snapped up, its eyes like frozen lakes fixing upon Leif. "A mortal dares approach Thorim, last of the frost giants," its voice boomed, shaking snow from nearby trees. Leif's heart raced, but he stood his ground. I heard weeping. Are you in pain, great Thorim?" Surprise flickered across the giant's face, softening its fearsome features. "You ask after my well-being, tiny one? How unexpected." Leif took a tentative step forward. "My name is Leif, and I would listen if you wished to share your sorrow." Thorim regarded the young Viking for a long moment before sighing, a gust of frigid air washing over Leif. "Very well, life of Kattegat. I weep for my kin long gone from this world. I weep for the age of ice and snow retreating before the warmth of your kind's fires. I weep, for I am alone." Leif's heart ached at the giant's words. "But surely, great Thorim, you needn't be alone. Our village may fear you, but I would be honored to call you friend." Thorim's laughter rumbled like an avalanche. "Friend? To a frost giant? You are either very brave or very foolish, young Leif." "Perhaps a bit of both," Leif grinned. "But tell me, Thorim, why bring such a harsh winter to our lands?" The giant's expression grew somber. "It was not my intention. My sorrow manifests as cold and ice. The more I grieve, the harsher the winter becomes." Leif's mind raced. "Then perhaps if we could ease your loneliness, the winter might relent?" Over the next few days, Leif visited Thorim regularly, bringing tales of village life and listening to the giant's ancient stories. Gradually, the bitter wind lessened and the thick clouds began to part. Word of Leif's unusual friendship spread through Kattegat. Many were fearful, but others were intrigued. Astrid, the village elder, approached Leif one evening. "Tell me, young one, of this frost giant you've befriended." Leif's eyes lit up. "Oh, Elder Astrid, Thorim is wonderful. He knows so much about the old ways, about the land itself. And he's not cruel or evil, just sad and alone. Astrid nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time we met this Thorim ourselves. The next day, a small group from the village accompanied Leif to Thorim's hill. The frost giant tensed at their approach, but Leif's reassuring smile eased his concern. "People of Kattegat," Thorim's voice rumbled, "your young Leif has shown me great kindness. I would extend the same to you if you'll accept it." Bjorn, the village chief, stepped forward. "We've lived in fear of frost giants for generations, Thorim, but Leif has taught us that perhaps there's more to your kind than our stories tell." As the villagers and the frost giant conversed, sharing tales and finding common ground, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The harsh winter began to recede, replaced by a more manageable cold. In the days that followed, Thorim became a familiar sight near Kattegat. He helped clear snow from the village paths, used his immense strength to free the trapped fishing boats, and shared his vast knowledge of the land with the curious villagers. One evening, as Leif sat with Thorim watching the aurora dance across the sky, the frost giant spoke softly. "Thank you, young friend. Your kindness has melted more than just the ice around us." Leif smiled up at his enormous companion. "And your friendship has taught us all that even in the coldest heart, warmth can be found." As word spread of Kattegat's unusual alliance, other villages sought to learn from them. The harsh winter that had threatened to destroy them instead became the catalyst for a new era of understanding between humans and the ancient beings of the land. Years later, Leif, now a respected elder himself, would tell wide-eyed children the tale of the winter when Kattegat befriended a frost giant, and in the distance, Thorim's gentle laughter would rumble like far-off thunder, a reminder of the friendship that had changed them all. In the village of Kattegat, where the sea met the land and ancient forests stood sentinel, lived Helga, a wise woman known for her deep connection to nature. With hair as silver as moonlight and eyes as green as spring leaves, Helga had always felt a special bond with the towering trees that surrounded their settlement. One misty morning, as Helga gathered herbs at the forest's edge, she heard something unusual, a soft rustling whisper that seemed to come from the trees themselves. "Hello?" Helga called softly, her weathered hand resting on the bark of an old oak. "Is someone there?" The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Helga, listen closely." Startled, Helga looked around but saw no one. Realization dawned on her. The voice was coming from the tree itself. Her heart raced with excitement and a touch of fear. "I can hear you," she said to the oak, "but how is this possible?" The tree's response was gentle, its leaves rustling softly. "You have always listened, Helga. Now we can finally speak. The forest has much to share." From that day forward, Helga spent every spare moment in the woods, learning the language of the trees. She discovered that each species had its own voice. The oaks spoke with deep, measured tones, while the birches whispered quick, cheerful messages. As weeks passed, the villagers began to notice a change in Helga. She spoke with newfound wisdom about the land and seemed to predict weather patterns with uncanny accuracy. One evening, as the village gathered in the great hall, Bjorn, the chieftain, approached Helga. "Wise one," he said, his voice tinged with concern, "the people speak of your strange new knowledge. Some fear you've been bewitched by the forest spirits." Helga smiled softly. "No bewitchment, good Bjorn. The forest has simply chosen to share its wisdom with us." Bjorn's brow furrowed. "Share its wisdom? Helga, trees cannot speak." "Ah, but they can in their own way," Helga replied. "Come with me tomorrow at dawn, and I will show you." The next morning, Helga led Bjorn and a group of curious villagers into the forest. As they reached a clearing, she placed her hand on a massive ash tree. "Listen," she instructed. "Open your hearts and minds to the voice of the forest." At first, the villagers heard nothing but the normal sounds of the woods. But as they stood in silence, concentrating, a few began to pick up faint whispers on the breeze. Young Eric, his eyes wide with wonder, was the first to speak. I think I hear something." The ash. It's warning about a dry summer ahead. Astrid, the village's best farmer, gasped. Yes, and the birch is suggesting we plant our crops closer to the stream this year. As more villagers began to hear the tree's messages, excitement rippled through the group. Bjorn turned to Helga, awe evident in his face. This is incredible, Helga. But why have the trees chosen to speak to us now? Helga's eyes twinkled. They've always been speaking, Bjorn. We're simply learning to listen. The forest wishes to help us live in harmony with the land. In the days that followed, guided by Helga and the forest's wisdom, the village of Kattegat began to change. They adjusted their farming practices, learning to work with the land rather than against it. They discovered new medicinal herbs and more sustainable ways to harvest timber. One evening, as Helga sat by the forest's edge, Bjorn joined her. You've brought great changes to our village, Helga, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Helga smiled, her gaze sweeping over the trees. The forest has always been our silent guardian, Bjorn. Now it's our partner in ensuring a prosperous future. As word spread of Kattegat's harmony with the forest, other villages sought to learn their secrets. Helga began teaching others to listen to the trees, spreading the ancient wisdom throughout the Norse lands. Years passed and Kattegat flourished. The once feared forest became a place of learning and reverence. Children grew up understanding the delicate balance of nature, and the village's reputation for sustainable living spread far and wide. On her last day, as Helga felt her life ebbing away, she asked to be taken into the heart of the forest. As she leaned against her beloved oak, surrounded by her people, the trees began to whisper a gentle lullaby. Thank you, old friends, Helga murmured, a peaceful smile on her face. Guide them well. As Helga's spirit departed, the villagers swore they could hear the forest weeping, a soft, rustling lament that echoed through the woods. But mingled with the sorrow was a promise, carried on the wind. The wisdom of the whispering forest would forever be a part of Kattegat, guiding and protecting them for generations to come. From that day forward, the people of Kattegat honored Helga's legacy by continuing to listen to the forest's whispers, ensuring that the harmony between humans and nature would endure for ages to come. In the heart of Kattegat, where the smell of salt and pine intermingled with the smoke of hearth fires, lived young Rollo. With unruly dark hair and eyes that seemed to look beyond the visible world, Rollo had always been different from the other children. His nights were filled with vivid dreams that left him wide-eyed and breathless come morning. At first, his parents dismissed his excited recountings as mere childish fantasies, but as weeks turned to months, and Rollo's dreams began to mirror events in the village with uncanny accuracy, whispers began to spread. One crisp autumn morning, Rollo burst into the village square, his voice high with urgency. "The ice bear," he cried. "It comes from the north, hungry and fierce." The villagers paused in their daily tasks, exchanging bemused glances. Bjorn, the village chieftain, approached the boy with a patient smile. "Now, Rollo, what's all this about an ice bear? We haven't seen one of those in these parts for generations." Rollo's eyes were wide and earnest. "But I saw it, Chieftain Bjorn. In my dream, it came crashing through the trees, its fur stained with blood. We must prepare." Bjorn patted the boy's shoulder. "That's quite an imagination you have, lad. But we can't go chasing after every dream, can we?" As Bjorn turned away, Astrid, the village elder, fixed Rollo with a keen gaze. "Tell me more about this dream, child," she said, her voice low and intent. Over the next few days, most of the village forgot about Rollo's warning, but Astrid insisted on doubling the watch and reinforcing the village's defenses, much to the annoyance of some of the other elders. "You're giving too much credence to a child's nightmare, Astrid," grumbled Eric, one of the senior hunters. Astrid's reply was calm but firm. "There's often wisdom in dreams, Eric. We'd be fools to ignore them entirely." As the week drew to a close, a bone-chilling roar echoed through the village. Panic erupted as a massive ice bear, lean and desperate from the early winter, burst from the forest's edge. "To arms!" Bjorn's voice boomed across the square. Thanks to Astrid's preparations, the village was ready. After a fierce battle, they managed to drive the bear away without any casualties. In the aftermath, Bjorn approached Rollo, who stood trembling but proud. "It seems we owe you an apology, young one," the chieftain said, his voice humbled. "Your dream saved our village." From that day forward, Rollo's dreams became a valued part of village life. Each morning he would recount his visions to Astrid and Bjorn, who would interpret them and prepare accordingly. Some dreams were straightforward, storms approaching, shoals of fish moving into the fjord. Others were more cryptic, requiring careful interpretation. One misty morning, Rollo burst into the great hall, his face pale. "I dreamed of golden leaves falling from a silver tree," he gasped, and each leaf turned to ash as it touched the ground. The elders exchanged worried glances. Astrid leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Tell us more, Rollo. What else did you see?" As Rollo described his dream in detail, the village leaders debated its meaning. Finally, Bjorn spoke. "Could it be a warning of fire? Perhaps we should clear the brush around the village just in case." His suggestion proved wise when, weeks later, a lightning strike ignited the forest. Thanks to the cleared area, Kattegat was spared from the flames. As the years passed, Rollo's gift only grew stronger. His dreams guided the village through harsh winters, bountiful harvests, and even raids from rival clans. But the weight of his visions often left him exhausted and isolated. One evening, as Rollo sat alone by the shore, Astrid joined him. "Your gift is a heavy burden, child," she said softly. Rollo nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes I wish I could dream like everyone else, Astrid. Just meaningless shadows and fragments." Astrid placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your dreams may set you apart, Rollo, but they also bind you to this village in the most profound way. You are our seer, our guide through the mists of time." Rollo managed a small smile. "I just hope I'm always able to interpret them correctly. The responsibility is overwhelming at times." "That's why you're not alone," Astrid reminded him. "We're here to help you understand and act on your visions. Remember, even the gods don't bear their burdens alone." As night fell and the stars emerged, painting the sky with ancient constellations, Rollo felt a sense of peace settle over him. He may walk a lonely path, but it was one that kept his people safe and prosperous. In the years that followed, the fame of Kattegat's dreamer spread far and wide. Other villages sought alliances, hoping to benefit from Rollo's prophetic visions. And though challenges still came, the people of Kattegat faced them with confidence, knowing that in the realm of dreams, they had a vigilant guardian, forever watching over their future. In the village of Kattegat, where the mountains embraced the sea, lived a young herbalist named Sigrid. With hair as dark as raven's wings and eyes the color of moss, Sigrid had always been more comfortable among her plants than with people. Her shy nature and unusual affinity for herbs had often set her apart from the other villagers. As winter's grip began to loosen, a mysterious illness swept through Kattegat. It started with a few cases, fatigue, fever, and a strange blue tinge to the skin. Within days, half the village was bedridden. Bjorn, the village chieftain, called a meeting in the great hall. "Our people are dying," he announced, his voice grave, "and our traditional medicines seem powerless against this sickness." Sigrid, standing in the shadows, felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She knew she should speak up, but fear held her back. It was Astrid, the village elder, who noticed her discomfort. "Sigrid?" Astrid called gently. "You have a gift with herbs. Have you any insights?" All eyes turned to Sigrid, who felt her face flush hot. I'm not sure," she stammered. "But I've been having strange dreams of a hidden fjord. The waters there, they glow with an unearthly light." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eric, a respected warrior, scoffed. Dreams in glowing water? We need real solutions, not fairy tales. Bjorn held up a hand for silence. In times like these, we must consider all possibilities. Sigrid, would you recognize this fjord if you saw it? Sigrid nodded, finding courage in the chieftain's trust. I believe so. It's nestled between two peaks that look like a wolf's ears. I know the place, growled Gunnar, an old hunter. It's a day's journey north, through treacherous terrain. Few have ventured there and returned. Bjorn's eyes narrowed in thought. Then we shall mount an expedition. Sigrid, you will lead it, along with Gunnar and a small team. As dawn broke the next day, Sigrid found herself at the head of a small group, venturing into the wilderness. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. The journey was arduous. Steep cliffs, icy streams, and dense forest challenged them at every turn. As night fell, they made camp in a sheltered valley. We're fools to follow a girl's dream, Eric muttered, warming his hands by the fire. Gunnar's response was gruff but kind. Aye, perhaps, but what other hope do we have? Sigrid, overhearing, felt doubt gnaw at her. What if she was wrong? What if she was leading them on a wild goose chase while more villagers fell ill? As if sensing her turmoil, Astrid, who had insisted on joining despite her age, sat beside her. Faith, child, she said softly, in yourself and in the gods who send us visions when we need them most. The next day, as the sun reached its zenith, they crested a ridge and gasped. There, nestled between two peaks that indeed resembled a wolf's ears, lay a hidden fjord. Its waters shimmered with an otherworldly blue-green light. By the gods, breathed Gunnar. The lass was right. Sigrid approached the water's edge, her heart pounding. As she knelt and dipped her hands into the fjord, she felt a surge of energy course through her body. The water was warm despite the chill in the air, and seemed to pulse with life. Quick, she called to the others. We need to collect as much of this water as we can carry. As they filled their water skins and jars, Sigrid noticed plants growing along the shore that she had never seen before. Acting on instinct, she carefully harvested samples, knowing they might hold additional healing properties. The return journey was filled with a sense of urgent hope. When they finally reached Kattegat, they found the situation had worsened. More than 2/3 of the village now lay ill. Without hesitation, Sigrid began administering the glowing water to the sick. She also brewed teas from the strange plants she had gathered, guided by an intuition she couldn't explain. To everyone's amazement, the effects were almost immediate. Within hours, fevers broke and the blue tinge began to fade from the villagers' skin. By the following dawn, most of the sick were on their feet again, weak but recovering. In the Great Hall, Bjorn raised a horn of mead to Sigrid. You have saved our people, he declared. Your courage and wisdom will be remembered for generations to come. Sigrid, unused to such attention, felt her face grow hot. It wasn't just me, she said softly. It was all of us, working together. And perhaps the gods themselves guided us. In the days that followed, Sigrid led expeditions back to the healing fjord, carefully harvesting its waters and plants to replenish the village's stores. She also began teaching others her newfound knowledge, ensuring that the healing wisdom would not be lost. The once shy herbalist found herself at the center of village life, respected and sought after for her knowledge. Yet she never forgot the lesson of the healing fjord, that true strength comes from working in harmony with nature and with each other. As years passed, the tale of Sigrid and the healing fjord became legend, a reminder to all in Kattegat that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from listening to the quiet voices within and daring to venture into the unknown. The coastal village of Kattegat had weathered many storms, both literal and figurative, but nothing had prepared them for the day the runestone was unearthed. It happened during the construction of a new longhouse, when Gunnar's axe struck something hard beneath the soil. By Thor's hammer, Gunnar exclaimed, brushing away the dirt to reveal an intricately carved stone. "Bjorn, come quickly." Bjorn, the village chieftain, hurried over, his eyes widening at the sight. A rune stone, and one I've never seen before. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire village had gathered around the mysterious find. The runes etched into its surface were ancient and complex, unlike anything they had seen before. Young Bjorn, namesake of the chieftain and known for his quick mind, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His eyes scanned the symbols, brow furrowed in concentration. "Can you read it, boy?" asked Eric, the village's most respected warrior. Bjorn shook his head slowly. "Not yet. These runes are different. I'll need time to decipher them." As Bjorn began his work, whispers of unease spread through Kattegat. Some saw the runestone as a blessing from the gods, while others feared it was a curse. Days passed, and Bjorn labored tirelessly over the stone. The village waited with bated breath, tension growing with each passing hour. Rumors began to circulate, each more frightening than the last. "I heard it foretells a great plague," muttered Astrid, the village healer, as she gathered herbs in the market. "Nonsense," retorted Gunnar. "It clearly warns of an impending attack. We should fortify our defenses." As fear gripped the village, old rivalries resurfaces and new suspicions arose. Neighbors who had once shared mead now eyed each other warily across the street. Bjorn, aware of the growing discord, redoubled his efforts. He consulted ancient texts, sought counsel from the elders, and even journeyed to neighboring villages to speak with their rune masters. Finally, after nearly a fortnight, Bjorn called the village together. The air was thick with anticipation as he stood before them, the runestone at his feet. "People of Kattegat," he began, his young voice steady and clear. "I have deciphered the runes, and I now know their true meaning." A hush fell over the crowd. Bjorn took a deep breath and continued. "This stone does not bring a curse, nor does it foretell doom. Instead, it brings a warning and a gift." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The runes speak of a great flood, one that will come with the spring thaw, but they also tell us how to survive it." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Chieftain Bjorn stepped forward. "Explain, young one. What must we do?" The younger Bjorn pointed to specific runes on the stone. "These symbols speak of building our homes on higher ground, of constructing strong sea walls, and of storing food and fresh water. If we heed this advice, we will not only survive but thrive." Relief washed over the villagers, quickly followed by a sense of purpose. Chieftain Bjorn clapped the young man on the shoulder. "You've done well, namesake. Now let us put this knowledge to use." In the weeks that followed, Kattegat was a hive of activity. Homes were relocated to higher ground, sturdy sea walls were erected, and storehouses were filled with provisions. The work was hard, but it brought the village together, healing the rifts that fear had created. As the first signs of spring appeared, so too did the flood. Water rose higher than anyone had ever seen. But thanks to their preparations, Kattegat stood firm. From the safety of their elevated homes, the villagers watched as the waters swirled below, grateful for the ancient warning that had saved them. When the flood finally receded, Kattegat found itself uniquely positioned. While other villages had been devastated, they were intact and well supplied. They were able to offer aid to their neighbors, forging new alliances and trade relationships. One evening, as the village celebrated their survival and newfound prosperity, young Bjorn stood before the runestone, now displayed prominently in the center of the village. Astrid approached him, a respectful smile on her face. "You saved us all, Bjorn. How did you manage to unlock the stone's secrets when even our eldest scholars were baffled?" Bjorn turned to her, his eyes twinkling. "I listened, Astrid, not just to the words of our elders or the texts of our ancestors, but to the stone itself. These runes, they speak to those who have the patience to truly hear them." Chieftain Bjorn, overhearing, nodded approvingly. "And that, young namesake, is the mark of a true leader. You've not only saved our village but taught us all a valuable lesson. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from stepping back, calming our fears, and listening to the whispers of the past. As night fell and the stars emerged, the people of Kattegat gathered around their fires, sharing tales of their triumph over adversity. The runestone stood silent witness to their celebrations, its ancient wisdom now a living part of their legacy. From that day forward, Kattegat flourished, its people forever mindful of the balance between respecting the past and preparing for the future. And young Bjorn, the boy who had unlocked the runestone's secrets, grew to become a leader as wise and beloved as his namesake, guiding Kattegat into a new era of prosperity and harmony.